Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto wields a sentient weapon harem. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Foy the Snooze Button and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. If there was one thing Naruto found out from a very young age, it was that he was a freak. The boy 6-year-old sat near a river miles away from his home village, Konoha, silently as he looked at his reflection. He had pale skin that became veiny if he got too tired, spiky light blue hair that spiked up more if he got too angry, sky blue pupil-less eyes that blinked back at him through his reflection, 3 thin lines on the sides of his neck that only opened up under water, and pristine white serrated teeth that if by some bad luck a tooth snapped another would replace it. Minutes later, the teeth didn't in any way protrude out of his mouth or make his jaw wider. He wore a black shirt that had the sleeves torn out and plain black shorts with blue ninja sandals. He bared his teeth and used his index finger to tap them experimentally. It clinked under his neatly trimmed fingernails. He looked at his sleeveless arms and saw another reason the children in the village called him a freak. There was a thick black tattooed line going from his fingers up his arm to his back, where the other thick lines from his other arm and leg joined together between his shoulder blades. A thick line shot up the back of his head and disappeared into his hair. The blue-haired boy puffed out a breath and crossed his legs in front of the softly flowing river. He smiled faintly as he saw some fish watch him curiously. At least they didn't run away from him, unlike his family. He still regretted following his uncle Orochimaru out of the village with his student Anko. He was the firstborn of 3 children, 2 of his younger siblings being twins. He was 3 years older than them, and he realized that his parents weren't exactly paying attention to him when they locked him in their house and left for the QB festival with the baby twins. He wasn't the sort of child that would spit and scream for attention, but they should at least remember that he too had to eat food, or that he too had to wear clothes, or even that he too needed to be looked after when he injured himself. That was why he followed his uncle out of the village, because he promised to make them love him again. That ended horribly. When they were far enough away from Konoha, he was knocked out, and he woke up looking like a sort of humanoid shark. His parents distanced themselves from him, and so did most of the village. The occasional drunk spitting on him, and calling him the snake's boy toy. After being chased into the forest of death, he swore to kill the man, to kill his uncle Orochimaru. And since no one wanted to help him, he would help himself. He only discovered that he could swim far better than any normal human during a training session he went through. He was trying and failing at using his chakra to stick to a branch. The training scroll he swiped from his father's library instructed him to go for smaller chakra control exercises before he progressed to harder ones. This was the first time he was happy he didn't listen to instruction. He fell into the water after the branch exploded from under him, and the sensation he felt after that could only be described as a. He stayed in the river for the rest of the day, and only noticed that the black lines on his arms had icy blue fins on them, and when the current tried to carry him away, and he swam towards shore, the ones on his back had fins too, but his legs didn't. He swam upstream, something nobody was meant to do, and found out it was both easy and fun. He zipped around the water impossibly, completely forgetting the fact that he wasn't supposed to be able to breathe, and swam in dexterous angles. He even saw to the bottom of the river and grinned at the shivering fish that saw him. Naruto used his newly discovered abilities to swim with the current out of the village to where he was right now. It was his secret place, where he could go to when he wanted to be alone or to train, whether his fish-like abilities or his more human aspects. Like today, he had just finished some leaf-sticking chakra control exercises and some muscle work. His endurance was almost unreachable as seen by how fast and how far he could swim, though he still trained it occasionally. The place was surrounded by trees several feet away from the water, with some large rocks jutting out of the ground. The sun shone over the place, but not overbearingly, and the breeze that passed through was soothingly cool to his sensitive skin. Right now it was about sunset, and he opted to take a break for the night and watch how the light twinkled on the surface of the water and how the passing otters would squeak at him and scamper into the forest. His ears twitched when he heard some twigs snap, and he jumped up in shock when someone stumbled into the clearing and fell down face first into the ground. The man looked worse for wear. His shirt looked like it was torn off, and his pants looked shredded but still intact enough to hide his junk, it seemed. The man had a strange-looking sword in his hands that sniffed the air and looked at him. It was purplish and had strange spiky scales that shivered when it saw him. It extended from the purple frilled-out scales to its equally scaly but smooth gray handle to the small skull at its tip. The man grunted and huffed to his feet. He swayed uncertainly, and it seemed that he couldn't see all that well from the way he kept rubbing his eyes. The man had bluish skin and long, shaggy hair that cascaded down his back. Naruto saw the fist-sized holes all over his torso that went clean through, the scorch marks on his left cheek, and the way the man supported his left leg, and he knew that the man wouldn't make it. The stranger looked at him and grinned weakly, making Naruto stumble backwards when he too had serrated teeth. The man too looked at him curiously before he fell on the ground again, this time facing upwards. Naruto, feeling a sense of strange brotherhood from the man, ran up to him and shakily hovered his hands over the mortal wounds. A few tears escaped his eyes and clenched his teeth to keep his sobs inside him. "Why are you crying, kid?" The man whispered hoarsely. He used his free hand to pat the boy's arm softly. "I can't handle crying kids." Naruto sniffled and took the man's hand in a firm grip. "You're just like me. he bared his teeth and moved the man's hands to his neck to stroke his gills. The man breathed in painfully and felt the boy's gills. "What's your name, kid?" My name is Naruto, sir." The dying man grinned again. "My name is Hashigaki Kisame." "You look like a leaf, kid. Why aren't you there?" "I was training. This is the only place I feel comfortable in." Kisame coughed out some blood and wheezed for air. The boy gently raised his head up. "Why can't you train with your friends, your family? They don't want me around." "No one likes me. I don't need them anyway. I'm getting stronger on my own and soon I'll be able to kill him." Kisame raised an eyebrow at the way the child spat out the word venomously. "Who?" "My uncle, Orochimaru of the Sannin." The man coughed heavily and globs of blood came out of his mouth. The wounds on his torso bled more heavily. He grabbed the boy's hand and passed his sword over. "I don't have much time, kid. I don't know you, but I know what it feels like to be rejected. I'm giving you my sword, Samahata, in good faith that you'll master it and that I at least did something good." He shakily stroked the shivering sword. "Take care of him, Samahata." The forest behind them exploded and out stepped a man Naruto would never forget, and another he swore to kill. Kisame unsealed the scroll and shoved it into the new wielder of the legendary sword. "Take this with the sword and run." Naruto only caught half of what he said. He was Bai's glaring bloody death at the snake Sannin who waved at him jovially. He snarled and his fins shot out of his body. The edges glowed a faint white, literally buzzing with energy. He grabbed the sword, which swallowed the scroll, and looked down at the dying man. His face softened and the buzzing quietened down under Kisame's stern gaze. The other man stood by and watched the proceedings from behind his one-eyed mask. "Why hello, Naruto-kun," the Sannin said smoothly. Said boy growled angrily and the buzzing started up again with renewed vigor. "I see you like my gift." The boy didn't respond but kept his eyes locked on Kisame's that silently kept telling him to run. "It's rude not to answer your elders when they're talking to you, child." Naruto squeezed the sword's handle with terrible force. Kisame got back to his feet unsteadily and stood in front of Naruto defiantly. The clearing quietened again as the boy's eyes widened in amazement. The man should not even be able to stand and he was clearly doing so. "Naruto," Kisame looked at him over his shoulder and pointed to Konoha's general direction. "Go get stronger for me and for yourself." The child nodded and sprinted into the water. He dived and his fins disappeared soon after with the huge sword giving a last shriek to his precious former wielder. "You do know that you'll still die and that I'll take that sword from him, right?" As impressive as that display was, the masked man said idly as he looked at his nails, "You should have made this easier and joined us. You would have been a very valuable asset to the Akatsuki. Kid's a natural if you asked me, Madara, and I'm sure he's going places." "You won't get that sword even if you tried," Kisame smiled strangely serenely as he watched the water ripple after the child's speedy entry. "I may love challenges but taking over the world is a bit too much." He slowly took his favorite stance, and too stupid. "Now if you don't mind let's get this over with." And with that he rocketed over to his two opponents. Naruto erupted out of the water and landed with a crouch. He looked at his surroundings and nodded when he noticed that he was in the Forest of Death, the place he usually was in if he wanted to go to his special place. The large sword chattered and the memory of the only person to trust him albeit blindly came back to him. He tearfully made a makeshift grave under a tree for the man and sat in front of it, looking intently at the Kisame's name carved on the bark by Samahata itself, who just so happened to be having the same thoughts. The sword sat on his lap, the scales smoothed down to allow him to stroke it gently. The sword wailed mournfully for the shark-skinned man. Midnight came and the boy finally calmed down enough to hold his hand out for the sword to spit out the scroll. The scroll had many storage seals written on it from top to bottom, and the only way he knew how to use it was because he usually saw his mother unseal her swords from a similar-looking seal on her arms. Out of the first seal, top left corner, fell another scroll that contained bandages that the man specifically instructed the next Samahata wielder to wrap the great sword in so as not to attract too much attention, and so that it wouldn't be too uncomfortable. The moon shone down into the clearing as he observed his neatly wrapped sword and hefted it onto his shoulders. He could do this because the sword shrunk a bit in size and because of his tortuously long muscle and endurance exercises, though he grunted in effort as he stepped forward. He looked over at the name carved on the tree and clenched his fist, Samahata purring softly through its bandages. "It's just you and me, buddy," he said silently as he ran out of the forest. The sword purred again and he giggled. "I know, right? We're going to get so strong." "Shiver, chatter," he whispered with the sentient sword as he slid through his family's gate after he swiped some blood on it and crept into the house into his room. He breathed a sigh of relief and laid his sword on the wall next to his bed. His room looked simple with a desk opposite his personal bathroom door, a single bed in the corner of the room near the window, a large purple rug over the ground and some of the scrolls he pilfered from the family library littered around the ground haphazardly. There were posters on the wall that showed pictures of famous ninjas throughout the elemental nations, from the surprise picture of the Kazakage to an expanded picture of the late Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, eating some noodles with his children, Asuma, Sato and Sim Sarutobi, a week before the Kyuubi's attack 3 years ago. He even had Orochimaru's picture. It had kunai scattered over his body and a thick slash through his neck from Naruto's arm fin. Naruto hid the scroll Kisame gave him under his pillow and sat on the bed, leaning on the wall. He looked at the massive sword and grinned toothily, the tear tracks under his eyes spoiling the eerie picture of childhood happiness. The moonbeam bounced into the room and cast a shadow over his body, leaving only his white teeth and blue eyes to twinkle like some sort of bogey monster. Thoughts of his improved training regimen ran through his head, and his smile widened impossibly. A childish giggle escaped his lips as he slumped into his bed, idly stroking the sword before he fell asleep 5 minutes later. Chapter 2. The next day Naruto awoke with a childish grunt from Samahata's hiss. He begrudgingly opened his eyes and went about his normal morning rituals, bathing, brushing, dressing and pocketing a random Namake's library scroll. He hefted Samahata onto his shoulders and stalked out of the room into the semi-dark hallway. He shuffled past his parents' room and his younger siblings to the kitchen downstairs. He wore his usual black ripped-off sleeved shirt, black shorts and blue ninja sandals. He came down and met his family already eating their breakfast. He greeted them but was met with the usual side-eyed nod from his father and whispered answer from his mother. He ignored that and tickled the twins under their chins, and walked past them into the kitchen, the sword still on his shoulders, to grab some tea and if possible some grilled salmon. The mere thought of his second favorite delicacy made his mouth water, and he quickened his steps. He leaned his sword by the fridge and opened it. He hummed to himself when he didn't see the grilled salmon but grilled pork, his third favorite meal. He took it out and hefted it to the stove, standing on his stool, where he kept it on the fire to warm up while he went in search of his special tea. He smiled when he got his hands on his soothing caramel tea. The boy scampered over to the kettle and also put it on the stove as he also took out a cup and shoveled 2 spoons of the granules into it. In this story, they're granules. Deal with it. He put the caramel tin back into the cupboard and went back to his pork, which looked to be about hot enough, so he removed it and served it into a flat plate with the hot water in the kettle being poured into his cup. He didn't like sugar too much, so he just mixed it and took a small sip, resulting in a happy sigh to escape his lips. He hopped onto the counter and ate his meal. Samahata chose to be quiet for now. When he finished his breakfast, as heavy as it was, he leaped down and washed his plates with him standing on a stool to reach the sink. He walked out of the kitchen and ignored his parents as he walked to the door. "What's that on your shoulder, Naruto?" his father said idly as he took another spoon of cereal. The boy didn't even look at his father when he answered, "Something." "Don't get smart with me, kid." He just ignored the offended man and walked out of the door, gently closing it to show that he didn't think much of what the man had just said. He fully expected for his father to send some of his ninjas to follow him, maybe even befriend him. He didn't care. The last time he did care was before he heard his father mumble to his mother that he was a freak. He didn't hate them, he just didn't care anymore. He walked to the edge of the forest of death and paused when his massive sword shivered. He growled and bared his teeth at the person standing at the entrance of the forest. His arm fins shot out, and the lean muscles on his arms pulsed angrily as the edge of the arm fins buzzed a faint white. The coherent part of his mind thanked Kami that he had enough control in him for the fins at his back to not shoot out, or he would have been forced to go back home and endure the drama there. The girl raised her hands non-threateningly and motioned for him to calm down. The child looked like he would throw all caution to the wind and lunge at her, but before he could even bend his knees the bandage's sword shivered, and he cooled down. The girl allowed a faint smile to show on her face as Naruto steadily walked to her but frowned again when the child walked past her into the forest. She wore a tan trench coat with a full-body mesh suit under it, an orange mini-skirt over the mesh suit and black shirt with the leaf symbol on the chest. Before he could disappear into the forest she said, "I just want you to know that I didn't know Orochimaru would do this to you." He ignored her and kept walking. She jogged up to him and stood in front of him to stop his progress. "Listen, kid, he betrayed me too." He looked at her sharply and the arm fins slowly sunk back into his body. She pulled down the collar of her coat and showed him the seal matrix and the containment seal on it. "He gave me this hickey and it hurts like a kunai being shoved up my ass." She didn't get the laugh she was expecting, not even a blush. Anko coughed into her hands and continued, "No hard feelings, okay?" He looked up at her, then at the hand she extended. He settled the sword at his side and shook the hand. "Whatever. Just stay out of my way," and he picked up his package again and trudged into the forest. Anko would have been offended if it was an older person saying it, but the boisterous girl couldn't bring herself to beat the disfigured boy into the ground for his blatant show of disrespect. "Okay. I'll see you later." The words came out before she could take them back, and the 14-year-old girl found her heart give a sudden thud when he waved at her, over his shoulders. Cool. See you." And Anko ran in another direction in the forest. Naruto ignored his sword's giggling sounds as he reached his leaving point. The shark boy stretched his body, the sword on the ground, before he took off his shirt and passed it over to Samahata to swallow it. He huffed under the weight of the sword as he ran full tilt to the water, taking a majestic leap and the diving in smoothly. His fins came out, and if one were to see it from the land it would look like a very large fish was tearing through the water at breakneck speed down with the water current. Time skip, 4 years later. A tall blue blur swept past the unsuspecting citizens of Konoha. It swerved and rolled away from a food cart, while at the same time not slowing down enough for anyone besides the ANBU and some jounin that were passing by to get any solid picture of him. The blur swore quietly as he ducked through a clothing shop and flew out of the window, the shopkeeper none the wiser. It bounced off the wall outside the window, and used the canopy of the food cart to lightly bounce to the roof where it continued its frenzied sprint. The academy came into view and it sped up even more if that's even possible and slid into the large front doors and powered up the stairs, deftly dodging Chunin and students that scampered around him to their classes. It went to the highest floor and barreled through the door near the end of the floor. "Kaze Naruto," the class's sensei said from behind his clipboard before he looked at the panting pile on the ground with an amusedly raised eyebrow. I am here, sensei," the person said as he slowly got up and dusted himself off. He grinned and waved to his teacher before he scanned the class for any open seat, and found on at the back of the class near the ever-quiet Minisaki Aburame. He also noted the wide berth the other students were giving her, and rolled his eyes. Cutting it a bit too close there, Naruto, the sensei, Tanbo Gizo. The man was exceptionally tall for his age, and even rank, but despite this he somehow only wanted to be a teacher. Most of the students, and some members of staff even said that he was Might Guy's training partner, which was true. A few more minutes later, and you would have spoiled your record. Go and take a seat, kid. The boy bowed to the man and walked up the stairs in the class purposefully. He snapped his teeth when he caught a boy's foot trying to trip him and smiled when he hastily pulled it back. The class started murmuring to themselves as the teacher went outside to meet another teacher who was having a small problem in his own class, aka substitute teacher. They noticed the Yandame's wayward son walking past the naturally appointed line to separate the rest of the class from the creepy bug girl the 10-year-old stopped beside the Aburame's desk and relished in the fact that she had broken her stoic look to gape up at him. He smirked at her and pointed to the seat directly beside her and asked, "Is this seat taken?" He could hear her hive buzzing quietly in secret anticipation as she nodded her head slowly. He took the bandaged bundle off his back and leaned it by his chair as he took the seat. He smiled at her and extended his hand. "My name's Namikaze Naruto, the Yandame's son." "I know," she reverted back to her Aburame patented stoic face as she looked at him intently. He still caught the faint blush of embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I'm not used to people talking besides my clanmates to me. My name is Aburame Minisaki, Namikaze-sama." Her voice was light and airy, like a breeze on a warm summer's day. "You don't have to call me that, Minisaki-san. Just call me Naruto or that cool dude if you want." She cracked an almost invisible smirk from under her nose-long collared coat. "I am not calling you that cool dude, Naruto-san. I tried." The tall for a 10-year-old boy wore a gray and black, neatly made, sleeveless shirt that had a hood hanging down, with black pants that were taped at the ankles. He also had his usual blue sandals. He chose to wear white bandages around his arms and neck to hide the scratch marks from when his sword slipped from his hands and shaved a bit of his skin off during the leaf exercise last year. The ones on his neck were to conceal his gills. Make no mistake, he wasn't ashamed of who he was anymore. He just didn't think it looked all that attractive if it randomly breathed for him if he somehow forgot to. The shaved arms had healed slightly, but he still kept the bandages on because he thought it made him look badass. He riffled through his side bag and pulled out a book and a pencil. I don't remember if the students then used books, but in mine they do, and placed it on the table. The girl beside him observed him quietly, not even having the decency to do it secretly. The blue-haired boy nudged her with a smirk. "I know I'm good-looking, but you don't have to stare." Minisaki's smirk widened slightly and she answered coolly, "If I were to be honest, I would say you were the most awkward boy I have ever had the pleasure of speaking to, but I didn't want to be rude." The insulted boy didn't even break composure. "You didn't call me ugly, Minisaki-san," Naruto sang as he waggled his eyebrows. She stomped on his foot and faced the front of the class, though her smirk did widen again. She dressed like a generic academy-going Aburame child, but with small difference. While the females in the clan opted not to wear too much makeup or none at all, Minisaki wore predominantly black makeup. Black eyeshadow on her upper eyelid, black lipstick on her rarely seen lips with streaks of blue in her black hair. She even had black nail polish and a small white skull hairpin in her hair. Naruto winced in pain from the foot as he looked at his notebook with his pencil being lightly gnawed between his teeth in frustration. "Say, Minisaki-san, did you get that note on calculating kunai trajectory?" His response was a black notebook being shoved under his nose. He took it carefully out of her pale hands, almost as pale as his own, and flipped through it, idly listening to Tanbo going over the same topic. After the usual theoretic aspect of being a ninja was done for the day, Tanbo ushered his students out of his class to the kunai range for the practical aspect. They could either use their own kunai or academy-grade kunai. The shark boy grunted in displeasure as he once again missed the target, cursing quietly when he missed another one, then cursing loudly when he missed again. The Aburame girl, who had followed him out of the class, watched this with a raised eyebrow from behind her glasses. She tapped his shoulder and said, "Your posture is wrong and you're using too much force in your throws." She collected his kunai and idly chucked them at the targets, all three of them hitting just outside the middle circle. "It's not like I'm going to ever use a kunai. It's still basic knowledge if you want to pass the graduation exams." "Well, I think that's horse shit. Go tell that to Hokage-sama." "I can and I will," he said lowly as he poked her shoulders. Naruto grunted again as he took a kunai and threw it at the target, missing it completely and nailing an unsuspecting bird on the head. "At least I hit something." When he made to throw another kunai at the bird, Minisaki forcefully grabbed his arm, him not being too much taller than her, lightly kicked the back of his right knee and then gently kneed his stomach. "Try now." He glared at her and coughed. She frowned slightly and was about to scold him until she saw his eyes flicker to her hand, still holding onto his arm. She pulled it off like it was on fire and rubbed it on her coat. He looked at the target and let his arm fly, The weapon nailed the bullseye a bit to the edge. He looked at her and smirked confidently. See? I told you I could do it. The girl rolled her eyes and went back to her own kunai work. Not a minute later and she heard a quiet curse, and she let loose a quiet, breathy laugh. They kept up with their target practice until their sensei instructed them to pair up for their taijutsu spar. It was unlike their normal spars where Tanbo would call 2 random names and have them spar against each other because he felt it would be a nice and rare change to pair a boy against a girl. The man even called them up to the sparring mat and had them fight their partners, which were of the opposite sex due to him choosing so. He didn't have to choose the yandame's partner because she was already female. When most of the fights were done, it was Naruto and Minisaki's turn to spar. The usually smiling boy was now as stone-faced as his female opponent, calmly ignoring the yells from his classmates. The two simultaneously took up their different taijutsu stances. Minisaki took the basic Aburame taijutsu stance while Naruto took the basic Miss Swordless style taijutsu stance. The teacher looked at them with raised eyebrows before he shrugged and called for quiet. Namake's Naruto vs. Aburame Minisaki. Begin. He stepped back and watched curiously as the two students circled themselves before the girl ran to the boy, cool as ice. She threw a punch and he slapped it away and punched her, but she blocked it and kicked his side. He caught the leg and ducked under the follow-up leg easily with the limb still in his hand, which meant he pulled her onto the ground, her back upwards. He still had to flip back from the donkey kick. This time he ran forward and feinted to the left, punching her side when she followed the feint. She caught the limb with a pained wince and pulled him in, promptly kneeing his stomach, driving all air out of him and allowing her to punch his chest twice. Naruto used the force of the blow to fall back and flip forward again with a drop kick. She ducked under the kick and rolled away from the donkey kick. The students stood back up again and circled each other with the class quietly watching the very much interesting match. The Aburame ran at the yandame's son and punched his face just as the boy cleared her feet from under her. They fell on the ground and again simultaneously rolled away from each other and flipped onto their feet. They darted to each other and exchanged identical blow after identical blow that met between them. He punched and she kicked and he kicked. It was dizzying seeing how much in sync they were until the boy slipped a kick past her outstretched leg and hit her stomach. He punched the side of her face and elbowed her chest as she wheezed for air. He slapped her palm strike away and kicked her side. He stepped back and waited for her to get her breath back before he ran at her, punched her face, kicked her feet from under her, and held her down by her shoulders. The two 10-year-olds locked gazes as their sensei called the match in the boy's favor. He helped her up and dusted her shoulder nervously. They bowed to each other and the boy stepped forward with an outstretched hand. That was a good spar, Minisaki-san. Yes it was, and if you don't mind I would like for you to have a rematch later, if you want. She shook his hand firmly and took the ice pack her sensei gave her, carefully pressing it to her cheek. I don't mind. If you want to lose again so badly I'll be happy to grant you your wish. She smiled a bit at his confident words, the only sign of her doing so being the small crinkles by her nose. I went easy on you, Naruto-kun. They walked back their seats a bit far away from the rest of the class, unaware of the fact that they were still holding hands or that the girl had just called his name with the affectionate masculine honorific kun. He smiled widely and nudged her side as they sat down. Me too. They watched the rest of the spars as they quietly discussed animatedly about anything that came to their minds. The girl even laughed her breathy laugh again at one of his training accidents. She had opened up and told him that she stayed with her grandfather who was an elder in the Aburame Council. Her parents died on a misranked mission. This was the sight the citizens of Konoha were subjected to. The yandame's delinquent son unknowingly flirting with the Aburame girl who also unknowingly responded in kind. Naruto dropped her off with her grandfather in the clan compound. The man wore a neutral expression at seeing them together, and went off to train in his private place. Chapter 3. An hour after sunrise, weekend in Konoha, deep in the forest of death a tree fell. 2 more followed suit before there was a loud celebration of joy. Finally! Naruto yelled as he marched around the man-made clearing, Samahata waving above him, sharing his joy. The blue-haired shark boy whipped his sword above his head and it lashed at another tree, shaving it deeply so it fell down. The legendary sword shrunk in size and squealed, I know, buddy, what's next? Shiver, water clones, huh? The 11-year-old boy leaned his sword by a tree and opened his training scroll, nodding to himself. He tossed the scroll to Samahata and it gulped it down as usual. He tested the hand seals first without chakra, like the scroll instructed. Then when he instinctively knew that he was going fast enough and had memorized the chain, he weaved his chakra with the hand seals. Water clone technique, nothing happened. He looked around before he jumped back when he saw a dwarf version of himself grinning up at him. Not enough chakra. This is going to be a long day. Midday and all the chakra control exercises finally paid off. He had made a perfect water clone. He didn't have enough chakra to make too many, he just had enough to make 4. For now. Next order of business, shark ability training. He glared at a tree that and channeled a drop of his chakra to his hair. It spiked up dangerously, and the boy bent his head and fired it off in quick succession. When he heard light thunks on the sturdy tree he lifted his head and grimaced. The spikes were everywhere. The target tree's trunk, the trees around his target trees and the unfortunate birds that chose to remain in the tree despite him felling some. He ignored Samahata's giggling and began the exercise again, trying to shape his crazy spiky hair into a spear and shoot it at his target tree. Better result, but the carnage was still present, so he relaxed his hair, and the samban hair and the trees and dead animals curled up and turned into small droplets of water. Naruto grit his teeth in concentration and his hair spiked up again, then painstakingly slowly it gathered together into a long point. He leaned his head down, and the tit shot out and dug into his target tree and a few others, but it was still progress from practicing for 3 years. He stretched his body, contorting himself in different angles, then he fell into the basic stance for his sword-less taijutsu. His arm fins slid out and slowly began buzzing with energy. He then went through the taijutsu style's kata but incorporated his razor-sharp fins into the mix. A forward punch with his right hand, then a follow-up elbow slash with his left. A roundhouse kick, then another roundhouse kick before he slashed again. He grabbed thin air and brought it to his knees, elbow slashing before he apparently flipped the person over with a feinted foot. He backed up and drilled fast-paced punches in the air and alternated those with snap kicks from his left leg and slide kicks from his right. He brought the air into his grasp again, and this time used his other knee to drive the air out of its stomach and trip it to the floor. He flipped away twice and crossed his arms to block an imaginary blow before he slipped his legs forward and tripped his opponent again. He did this for an hour before he summoned a water clone to spar with him. The identical Naruto settled into the same stance, their bodies weight mostly on their left legs, razor-sharp elbows out and guarding their chests, and right arm pointing forward in a fist. The guarding elbow extends to the pointing arm and grasps the elbow as a sort of support, while the left leg leans back and right leg stretches forward lightly. You don't have to understand the stances. No significance whatsoever. Just felt like writing it. The still exposed sword that observed them from a tree whistled and the fighting duo shot at each other. The two exchanged a slash and dodge for their chests. The real Naruto punched the clone's exposed belly, and when the clone grunted in pain he jumped up and kicked it in the face, successfully dispelling it. He formed another one and they charged again. This one seemed smarter. He feinted to the left and tripped his boss. It was about to drill punches, but the real Naruto grabbed the fists and threw the clone overhead and flipped after him. The clone rolled away from the axe kick and slapped away a snap kick but didn't see the blow to the chest until he was thrown back into a tree, dispelling not too long after. The blue-haired Namikaze grunted in frustration and summoned two clones, his shoulders sagging from the chakra drain. Perspiration formed on his head as he slapped away the synchronized attacks expertly and flipped away from the identical neck slashes. He caught a slash with his own fin and savagely kicked the water clone's knee, breaking it and giving him a chance to headbutt it to the ground. Before he could finish the clone off, he felt an impressively painful blow to the back of his head that had him skidding far away till a sturdy tree stopped his progress. His eyes were blurry as a kick impacted his shoulder and flung him into another tree. He raised his hands and frantically told the clone to stop. Thankfully it did. The water clone helped him up and gently dropped him by his sword. "Buddy, I need some chakra please," the sentient sword chattered and wriggled its handle into his hand. Since the day Kisame handed his sword to the child he had been storing chakra in it, like the scroll said, so that Samahata would recognize him, and so that if he ever was too low on it he would request for some. The dizziness that struck the 11-year-old ceased when he felt the comforting flow of his and Samahata's chakra enter into his arm and circulate through his body. That's better. He dispelled his clones and wobbled to his feet, still holding the sword of the mist, and stumbled to the center of the clearing. "I need more chakra before I can keep doing that, buddy. When do you think I'll have enough?" The living sword tittered before it shivered. "A year? Not too long. When I graduate I can be taking missions and sucking out enemy chakra like Kisame-sensei writes in the training scroll." Shrill cry, "Thanks. Say, I'm hungry. How about we go and have lunch?" He neatly wrapped Samahata in the clean bandages before he nodded to himself at his work and sped out of the forest. He pounded out of the forest in a blur and flipped expertly through the streets. He ran by the walls and jumped over some children playing ninja, then slid under a table where some elderly people were playing shogi. He front flipped to a wall and flipped to another till he got to the roof. He then continued his blurring run to the Namikaze mansion, which was a few ways away in the middle of the village by the Hokage tower. Naruto took a deep breath and crouched, eyeing the usual audience of Anbu and Jounin that caught him during his sprint back home, which was usually about 2 hours after noon. Most tried to look as inconspicuous as possible as they went about their duties, but he clearly saw how they would look up at his position for a few minutes too long. This meant only one thing. The Hokage, his father, assigned them to keep track of him, and if he was ever forced to run away they were to bring him back. Fantastic, he thought sarcastically. He had to find another route home, but the only one that could serve was the one by the massacred Uchiha compound, and he didn't feel like going anywhere near there. He tracked back stealthily and sprang into a dark alley. He looked out and spied a weapons shop. Perfect. He bent down and shot into the light, then into the weapons shop, bypassing the Jounin and Anbu that expected him to pass them from on top of the building. He ran into the shop and jumped out of the back door into a man's apron-covered belly. He gulped and looked up, coming face to face with a glare. "Ami?" He stumbled back and saw from the corner of his eyes a girl, maybe 2 years younger than him, with twin bun-styled hair, looking at him from behind a rack that contained iron bow staffs. "What are you doing running through my shop, Namikaze-sama?" Little surprised, the man recognized him. The shop owner was a burly man with a large shaggy beard. He wore a dusty apron and baggy black pants. He must be a blacksmith as well as a weapons shop owner. The man crossed his ripped arms and glared down at him with his beady black eyes. I hope you weren't trying to steal anything, right? No sir, I was just passing through. Naruto answered calmly, correctly reading through the man's glare. Orochimaru kidnapped a lot of people and used them in his sick experiments. Maybe one of this man's family members was used too. The blacksmith looked at the bandaged weapon on the tall child's back. What you got there? None of your business. He glared back at the obviously strong man and walked back to the entrance. I'll be on my way. Not so fast, kid. I have to make sure you didn't steal that. The man grabbed the boy's shoulder and reached over to the sword's handle. And no! Don't do that! But it was too late. When Higurashi's hand touched the legendary sentient sword, sharp spikes shot out of the handle and impaled his palm. The muscled man pulled his arm back and grunted in pain. Naruto used this opportunity to blur out of the shop and to his house. We now find the blue-haired swordsman in training pounding through his house and into his room. He closed his door with a shaky sigh and turned around. He smiled at his friend, Minisaki Aburame, idly sitting down on his bed and flipping through one of his notes. Hello, she said lightly. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ears as she looked at Naruto. Her glasses were gone to reveal dark blue eyes. Her jacket was also off and lay on his desk. She wore a long-sleeved black shirt with the Aburame clan symbol on the chest and black pants. This was as exposed any Aburame could get with any trusted non-clan mate without it being indecent. Hey, he unstrapped his weapon and leaned it on a wall. He jumped onto his bed and laid his head on her laps, welcoming her fingers to run through his hair. They stayed quiet as she combed through his hair and read his notes. Does it ever hurt? He looked at her questioningly. I mean, I notice how everyone looks at you and you said you ran away with him once. Does the way they look at you hurt? It's easier to ignore them. Do you hate me? She flicked his nose. Of course not. You're my first friend. I can't hate my first friend. She laughed her special laugh, the one she only let him hear, and he basked in the way her pale skin glowed and how her cheeks reddened when he smiled at her. She gently dropped his note beside her and allowed her breathy laughs to calm down. How was your personal training, Naruto-kun? I've finally got the hang of swinging Samahata and I've got water clones down pat. I still need more chakra though. He grabbed her fingers and idly played with them. How's your grandpa? She smiled warmly down at him. This is a better day. Shizen-san says he'll be able to come out of the hospital in a week or two. She says that he's too old and sick to be walking, so she's going to give him a wheelchair. He was so happy that when I wanted to leave he told me to say hello to you and smiled. Minisaki's airy voice filled the room and he happily listened to her animatedly talk about a story her grandfather told him about the last great ninja war to a butterfly he saw on her way to his house, then to her clan head's son, Shino, who was about the same age as his two younger siblings. Naruto just lay on her lap, content as he listened to her describe one of her cousin's hive. Her hands were waving over her head. They were the only indication that she was excited because her breezy voice didn't indicate it. It was nice feeling, having a friend. Before he met her, his daily schedule consisted of going to school, training and sleeping. Of course he'll eat too. But now, the welcome change was that the calm Aburame brought a ray of light to his formerly one-track life. He nodded when she asked him if he was hungry and dragged him downstairs to the kitchen and fixed him a sandwich. As they ate they kept talking about any random thing that came to mind. Your hive? What's up with them? They were the only ones at home, so she was still in her shirt and pants. In response she let a beetle crawl out of her wrist and settle between them. Gigi says my control is good enough for him to start advanced formations, she whispered to him. He nodded and zipped his mouth. I can even send them out to spy on people. Cool. He tore a bit of his chicken sandwich and swallowed. Up for a spar? Not now. Maybe tomorrow. I'm stuffed. She finished her own tomato and lettuce sandwich and cleaned her hands together. I feel like taking a nap. He raised an amused eyebrow. You mean you want to have another sleepover? A slight smirk from her answered him. Does your grandpa know? She punched his shoulders and answered, yeah, he knows. The house in the clan compound would be empty for another few weeks or so. You've got a problem with me staying? She raised her fist for another punch. Not in the least threatened. Naruto stood up, taller than her, and grinned. As long as you don't pee on my bed I'm game. The flustered Aburame girl punched his stomach numerously. I have never peed on the bed and I never will, idiot. He caught her fist expertly and patted her head. Yeah. Do you have your stuff or are you borrowing my clothes again? Borrowing meaning that she would wear them and never return them. He still wondered why she still had his boxers. I happen to have forgotten my things at home. I guess I'll have to make do with yours. Minisaki airily said as she sauntered back to his room. He grudgingly followed after her and mentally reminded himself to buy some more shirts. Fantastic. Time skip. 1 year later. Yo, Saki-chan, want to see something cool? The girl beside him shrugged nonchalantly as she looked up from the scroll she was reading. She was in her full Aburame garb as they sat at the back of the class waiting for the teams to be called. The difference being that she wore a dark blue-rimmed pair of glasses, and she dyed her hair dark blue with black streaks running through it. She also tied her forehead protector to her upper right arm. It was meant to be a prank. Naruto switched her shampoo for blue dye. She beat him up and didn't speak to him for a day. But since then she didn't really change much beside the black hair streaks. Naruto plucked out a strand of hair from his head and flicked it at the board. The hair strand lengthened and sharpened as it zipped down and nailed itself to the board. He released his control and the Senban hair strand curled inside itself and turned into a drop of water. Cool, huh? She rolled her eyes and went back to the scroll in her hands. It's okay. He nudged her teasingly. Bet you wish you could do that. She stomped on his foot and he immediately grabbed hold of them and fell off his chair. He limped back into his chair and glared at her. She ignored him. He wore his usual sleeveless and hooded garb with his forehead protector tied to his forehead. Team 4, Namikaze Naruto, Aburame Minisaki and Hyuga Joe. Your sense shall be Inuzuka Aizen. The duo, who had semi-reconciled, looked around for the Hyuga they were placed in a team with. The boy's milky white eyes caught their gaze and Joe smiled fractionally at them. He wore his forehead protector around his forehead, to hide his caged bird seal, indicating him as a branch member. He had a deep purple shirt and black shorts that contrasted his neck short and spiky silver hair. He had bandages wrapped around his arms and legs, even his fingers, which meant that he was still recovering from burnt tenketsu. Joe stood up and walked purposefully to them. He stopped in front of their desk, small smile still in place, and extended a hand to the Yandame's son. I am Hyuga Joe, Namikaze-sama, and it's nice to meet you. Naruto suspiciously eyed the limb for a moment before he shook it. No need to call me that. Just call me Naruto or foot stomp, courtesy of the silently reading Aburame beside him. He went son of a stomp and chose to jump over what he was about to say. He released the limb and the curious Aburame introduced herself to the boy and the Hyuga sat down beside the shark boy. Say, I don't mean to sound rude or whatever, but most Hyuga have dark hair and have metal poles shoved far up their asses, Minisaki mumbled. Joe's smile brightened at what they said. My Ka-san is from the Hataki clan. I inherited her hair, but I inherited the Hyuga Byakugan. My little bro inherited her hair and our Byakugan too. He's going to start school next year. This meant that he was the son of a main branch Hyuga and that he took the caged bird seal instead of his brother. It was quite obvious that the Hyuga was nervous. He kept twitching in his seat as he looked out the window. My Two-sen also tells me not to follow the crowd, or at least not all the time. So I would like to spar with you later, Naruto-san. Sensei says you're a bit higher in taijutsu than me, a point to be accurate, and I want to see it for myself. Haven't we sparred before? Yes, first year, but you weren't too good then. It's a big class. We can go at it after we meet our sensei, Joe-sen. Naruto nodded and bumped the boy's shoulder. Relax, dude. Joe nodded and took a few shaky breaths. Who do you think our sensei would be? I don't know. But he sounds pretty badass if you asked me. The Hyuga laughed quietly and smirked at Naruto. He was about to say something but was promptly interrupted by a male voice in front of the class. Team 4, with me. The speaker looked to be about 18 years old with a leanly muscled build. He wore the Leaf Standard Jounin flak jacket, tight dark red long-sleeved undershirt, black ANBU pants with black ninja sandals. He also wore red fingerless gloves and a forehead protector that neatly contained his gelled and combed-down brown hair. His dog partner was smoothly trimmed brown with patches of red on her fur. The dog looked to be about half the size of a horse with a powerful-looking iron lower jaw. If you're done ogling me, I'll meet you 3 in training ground 4 in 5 minutes. If you're late, you fail. He and his partner disappeared in a poof of smoke after his last words. What the man had just said finally registered in their minds. Wait, fail? The 3 newly minted genin scampered over themselves out of the class to the mentioned training ground. Chapter 4. Hyuga Joe. Ka-chan, a voice squeaked as said woman was frantically smoothing the boy's uncontrollably spiky hair down. Ka-chan. She smoothed down the wrinkles in his clothes and looked him over with critical eyes. Ka-chan. I'm fine. I know. It's your first day of your Hyuga training and I want you to go in style, you know? The 3-year-old rolled his eyes and kissed her cheek. I'll be fine. Yeah, but you'll be the youngest there. Sometimes I wonder why you inherited my clan's chakra. That way your Byakugan wouldn't have activated early. The Hataki mother knelt down in front of her child and thrust a lunch tin into his hands. Ka-chan, I'll be fine. Sometimes I also wonder why you inherited your dad's genes too. Kids your age would be panicking. He poked her forehead and smiled wanly. I got my coolness from you. Ka-chan. The beautiful woman pouted her full red lips and gave him a firm kiss on the forehead. He struggled out of her grasp and used the long sleeve of his traditional training kimono to frantically clean the lipstick stain on his forehead. Mom. The woman grinned and stood up fully. Most men still congratulated her husband on bagging her. She was voted in the Kanuchi magazine as the second best shaped right after Kushina Uzumaki. She had a healthy tan skin with silver pupil eyes that constantly glinted with mischief. Although she was still an active ninja, she had to take another maternity leave after she had found out that she was once again pregnant. She tied an orange bandana with the Hataki clan symbol dotted all over it on her long flowing silver hair. An oversized purple shirt Joe assumed was his father's and black shorts he assumed were her own. Oh hush, she smiled warmly when she felt arms slip around her waist and a head settle on her shoulders. Morning Kaizakoi. Morning. The man called Kaiza Hyuga yawned. He wore long black baggy pants and a purple shirt with his clan symbol on the chest. His short black hair was disheveled and messy. He let go of his wife and bent down in front of his son. Going to the dojo, huh? The silver-haired Hyuga child puffed out his chest as well as his cheeks. Hi Two-san. Remember what I told you yesterday? Hi, one on the jaw and another on the crotch. For who? Anyone that gives me trouble. The full-blooded and among the last survivors of the once great Hataki clan slapped the back of both their heads and grabbed their ears. What's this I hear about jaws and crotches? Both males were frantically looking around for any escape route. Look, Ka-chan. A farting donkey. And how it works every time. Wait, what? She let go of their ears and they used the small window of space to dash out of the house and in separate directions, waving goodbye to each other. I'll get you, Sochi-kun, and when I do you're grounded for a week for tricking your Ka-chan. The more down-to-earth Hyuga clan members chuckled when they heard her rant. The child ran all the way to the main house dojo and stood in line with the older and taller children there, patiently waiting for their appointed teacher to come and instruct them. The child looked around and frowned fractionally when he noticed that the other children were staying away from him. There was a significant gap between himself and the main house children by his sides. He ignored them and focused in on their sensei that had just entered into the class. The man lightly sneered at him, and he mentally sighed. Main house Hyuga. The rest of the theoretical and practical training was biased to say the least. The sensei kept making verbal potshots at him, clearly calling him a freak. When it was time to display any knowledge of Juken they had, he was paired against the tallest and considerably the best in their class and was summarily beaten into the ground. Remember your place, freak, the boy sneered quietly down at him and kicked his side when the teacher nodded in encouragement. Joe shakily got back to his feet and wiped his bruised cheek. He stumbled to the back of the class and cried into his knees. His young mind wondered why being a half-caste was a crime. One on the jaw and another on the crotch. His father's words echoed to him, and he grits his teeth in fury. He heard his name being called for another spar and he limped back to the sparring mat. His new opponent was another tall for a child Juken genius and training boy. Take the basic stance, the sensei barked out. Both children fell into the stances and glared at each other. Begin. Joe's opponent raced to him and palms struck the little boy's chest. The child gave a pained cry as he fell back. The older boy ignored him in favor of striking him again and again all over his body. Enough. Can't you do something with yourself, Joe? The sensei sneered. The child crawled to the back and cradled his sore arms to his chest. He whimpered in pain as he stroked them gently. The spars went round again until Joe versus Akuma. The boy limped to the match and painfully settled into the Hyuga's basic fighting stance. Begin. This match though was different. One on the jaw and another on the crotch. The child mumbled and gave an ungraceful blow to the side of his male opponent's face and stomped on his crotch when the victim fell on the ground. He knelt over the poor child's chest and continued dealing out more punches to his unprotected face until a strong hand pulled him back and straight into the wall. Joe winced and glared darkly at his teacher. The man pointed at the door. Get out. The boy complied without any complaint and left the dojo, but not without a final defiant glare. The child stomped to his house and ignored his mother when she ran over to him. He was back 6 hours early and was covered in bruises and small cuts. She pulled him into the bathroom and washed him up, and then she later covered his cuts with band-aids. What happened to you? The Hitaki woman asked her son. She brought him into a gentle hug when his pale eyes tore up. Joe-chan, he shook his head and she smiled. Did they make fun of you? He nodded into her chest and gripped her sides in his small hands. Did you do what your father said? He giggled. I knew you weren't ready. And no, Ka-chan, I'm just not strong enough to fight them at their own game. He pushed his head back and fixed her with a look no child his age should have. I need to get stronger. I'm pulling you out of the main house training, the newly appeared Kaiser Hyuga said from the child's bedroom door, and I'll fully take up your training. He bent down to hug his wife and child. Thank you Tusan. 3 years later, Namake's Naruto versus Hyuga Joe. Begin. Both 6-year-olds looked warily at each other. Naruto because he hadn't had any kind of taijutsu training, and Joe because this would be the first time he displayed how good he was in the Juken, according to his father. He slid into the basic stance, Byakugan blazing ceaselessly, and ran at the surprised shark boy. He poked Naruto's arms quickly and palms struck his chest without any chakra. Joe's eyes were wide when he realized that the Yandame's son hadn't made a move yet. He was in so much of a daze he didn't hear his academy sensei call the match in his favor. He swallowed thickly and nervously walked to the downed shark boy, readying his apologies until he caught the boy's distracted, faraway look. He knelt by Naruto shakily and began the slow process of opening his tenketsu again. I am SOSOS sorry, Namake-sama. The Yandame's disfigured child looked at him with his blue eyes and smiled faintly. Don't sweat it. The Hyuga child nodded and helped his fellow 6-year-old out of the sparring mat so another match could take place. He dropped him under the tree nearest to the class and stood by, nervously watching Naruto from the corners of his eyes. But all Naruto did was watch the clouds, sighing longingly. It was curious behavior, Joe thought to himself. The month that followed he observed a drastic change in his shark-like classmate, with the biggest one being the massive bandaged bundle on his back. He constantly refrained from invading his privacy by using his Byakugan to peek through, remembering his mother's long lecture on empathy. Another change was the boy's taijutsu as well as general posture in and out of the class. When his sensei told him 6 years later that Naruto, the boy he had soundly beaten on their first spar, was ahead of him, albeit with 1 point, in taijutsu he had to find a way to prove it. He being placed in Naruto's team was luck's way of smiling down on him. He turned around and faintly smiled at Naruto, his Abdurrahim friend too, and made his way up the stairs to them. I am Hyuga Joe, Namake-sama, and it's nice to meet you, with his clean bandage-covered right hand extended in a friendly handshake to his future teammate. He fractionally furrowed his eyebrows when the Yandame's son didn't immediately take it. Naruto shook the hand a minute later. No need to call me that, Just call me Naruto, or he heard a strange crunching sound from under the table. Son of A, the Hokage's son's eyes watered in pain. Then when Naruto had settled down, he politely asked him about something he now took pride in, his silver hair. He was obliged to answer as truthfully as possible as he sat next to the boy. He opted to make small talk like his mother used to tell him, and asked if he could have a spar in the future. Haven't we sparred before? Yes, first year, but you weren't too good then. This is a big class. We can go at it after we meet out Sensei, Joe-san. Relax, dude. He took shaky breaths as he anticipated the spar. Back at the clan compound, he didn't really have any friends to spar with, and his brother was too young to go up against. There was always Niji, the boy that had lost his father not too long ago, that he kept catching following him around, but he knew that even though the older Hyugas acclaimed him as a one-of-a-kind genius, he was certain he could still beat him. He didn't want to reduce someone's ego. Joe didn't know that he had been rudely staring at their apparent sensei until the last words the young jounin said registered in his mind. Wait, fail? Inuzuka Aizen, little 5-year-old Aizen, stood in front of the dog kennels, anxiously waiting for a dog to run out and pick him. The other kids had already gotten their own. Even the clan head's daughter, Hana, had gotten her pups, the Kuramura triplets. He was unlike most generic Inuzuka children. His dark brown eyes greatly complemented his neatly combed but short hair. He wore a clean pair of shorts, well-shined sandals and a white shirt with his clan symbol on the chest. He had a few friends, but most of the older ones tend to particularly pick on him because of his affinity for neatness. Thankfully it wasn't impulsive. His fingers were nervously tapping against each other as he shuffled a little bit into the kennels, eyes frantically looking about for a pup to pick him. He felt a hand on his small shoulder, and he looked up into the clan head's warm smile. The tall woman knelt in front of him, and he avoided her eyes with a deep red blush. No partner yet? She asked quietly. He nodded in response and scuffed his feet on the ground. I have the perfect solution for that. Do you want to hear it? He shrugged and kept his head down, his hair firmly in place. Your parents Niken had a pup not too long ago. What? They didn't tell you? His eyes were wide in astonishment. Yep, do you want to meet her? He was practically jumping on his heels, dragging her to the entrance of the large kennels. Yes, please. The woman laughed loudly and hefted him onto her shoulders and barreled out of the kennels. She stopped in front of the boy's house and gently dropped him so that he could take off his sandals. They opened the door, and they were immediately assaulted with the smell of medicinal incense. The boy scampered into the house straight into his parents' room and knelt by their bed, gently grasping his father's hand. The man weakly looked at him and smiled faintly. Hey there, kiddo. Aizen beamed at him. How are you feeling, Tusan? The man's raspy chuckle echoed around the room. Been better. Say, did your dumb Aunt-san tell you about the pup? They heard a nervous laugh from the entrance of the door. I couldn't help it, Oturo. The pup looked so sad. The man nodded and used his other hand to beckon her over. She walked to his bedside and sat there. She grabbed his hand and stroked it between hers. The incense doing anything, bro? If you're talking about my bad back, then it's fine. I'm only numb. He laughed when his son began running his finger through his hair. Your mother's in the kitchen, kid, go see her. Hi, Tusan. He stood up and left the room. When he closed the door, he ran straight to the kitchen and straight into his mother's turned back. Ka-chan. Aizen-chan. She dropped the vegetables she was cutting and turned around to hug her son. No Niken? Aizen's mother was who he inherited most of his facial features from. She also had dimples, brown eyes, slightly prominent fangs and golden tan skin. His father too had fangs like any other clan member, but his weren't too pronounced. The kitchen was one of the places that the incense didn't reach into, so it allowed him to smell his mother's peach-scented shampoo. No, Ka-san. She lifted him up to the counter and sat him down on top while she resumed her chopping. The pups don't like me. It's not like they don't like you, they haven't chosen you. No what? Fuji and Kaze had a pup not too long ago. I bet she'll like you. She looked at him from the side of her eyes and finished up her chopping. Is your aunt here? He nodded and twiddled his thumbs. Come on, let's go see the pup. Isn't Tusan going to come too? Her shoulders slumped fractionally and she looked away from him. No, he's too weak to be up and around, but he sends his blessings. Okay? He jumped onto her welcoming back and answered, okay. The woman walked to their backyard and into where the family let their Niken sleep whenever they wanted to get it on. Why? Wasn't Fuji and Kaze's pup staying with the other pups in the kennel? Your father made a special request to your auntie to keep her here. She dropped him in front of the kennel and nudged him forward. He shuffled into the small dog house and was immediately barreled into by a small blur. The blur turned out to be a brown with red spotted dog that was frantically licking his face. Aizen giggled happily and hugged the pup to his chest as they rolled on the ground. The parent dogs barked out laughs as they watched their week-old baby girl pup rough house with their partner's only child. The small dog finally got off the child and was busy yipping around the boy, jumping up and down. I'll call you Jet. He looked at his smiling mother who nodded at him. Let's go to the park, bud. He picked up the energetic pup and ran through the house straight to Konoha's park. As he got there, Jet got down from his arms and they promptly began playing an epic game of tag. Sure, the pup was a ball of energy on her own, but most people didn't know that Aizen too was also a ball of energy. They sped round and round the park until his dog lunged at his back and tackled him to the ground. They rolled around for a while until they heard someone faintly cough from above them. Both play fighters stopped and looked up. 5-year-old Itachi looked down at the pair with a conflicted borderline stoic expression. Would you mind if I joined you? Sorry, my name is Uchiha Itachi. His mother, Mikoto, stood a ways away with her fingers crossed, hoping her eldest and most reclusive son made a friend. My name's Inuzuka Aizen and this is Jet. Can you run? Fairly well, yes, we're playing tag. You can join in if you want. How do you play tag? He raised an eyebrow when both Inuzuka and partner gaped at him. I am not current in child games. Aizen stood up and dusted himself down. Jet doing the same, only that she shook her fur and scratched behind her ear. You see, 7 years later. Fong over Fong. 2 sharp spinning tornadoes drilled towards their target. The target jumped aside, watching in relief as the deadly tornadoes buried deep into the ground, and went through some hand seals. Fire style. Art of the Phoenix Fire. Multiple balls of fire came out of the sender's mouth, and honed towards the obvious Inuzuka that had launched the first attack. The duo flipped away from the exploding balls of fire, and the human partner whipped out 3 shuriken and chucked them accurately at his opponent, all the while going through a set of hand seals, shadow shuriken technique, and with that the 3 shuriken turned to 30. The opponent quietly cursed and ran away to his left from the barrage of spinning stars. Some of the steel weapons nicked his clothes, but overall he was fine. He sped over to the Inuzuka, kunai in his hands, and the two clashed together. Itachi swiped a kunai at Aizen, but the Inuzuka deflected it with his own kunai. The latter bent down after that and tried to trip the Uchiha, but the move was predicted by the other boy's 3 Tomioed Sharingan eyes. He jumped over the leg and brought up one of his for an axe kick, but he was momentarily distracted by the fact that he had forgotten about Jet, who had rammed her head into his side and thrown him far enough away from her partner. Jet was still in her man-beast clone form. Around! The real Aizen yelled to his partner, and they ran widely around the now standing Uchiha. Now from the sides, Jet Aizen lunged at Itachi while the real Aizen threw 2 kunai at the Uchiha. The thrown weapons phased through Itachi as well as Jet Aizen, meaning that it was an illusionary clone. Bark! Aizen's eyes widened when he felt a kunai on his neck before he sighed in defeat. What's the score? The weapon was pulled away from his neck and he turned around to see a faintly smirking and entirely smug Itachi. 14-13, I believe. You got lucky. You said that last time, because I smelt a cat last time. That's bad luck in my clan. Just like not washing your hair 4 times is bad luck, was Itachi's snarky retort. That's enough, boys. The two turned to look at their sensei, Orochimaru of the Sannin, as he smoothly slinked to them. The tall man was followed by his protege, Mitarashi Anko. I don't want any bad mouthing in my team, you hear? Both boys got away from each other and sharply bowed to the war veteran. Hi, sensei. Good. Now, I believe it is time to head for your homes. Dismissed. The 3 early graduates bowed to their sensei and walked out of the training field. The 3 were known as the 3 amateurs destined for only one, Itachi, to succeed. Even if the team had 2 clan proteges, the Sannin took interest in the team and encouraged the Sandang to assign him as their sensei. Presently, both boys, Aizen and Itachi, were known as the youngest jounins in history. It was remarkable watching the boys rise up in rank and beat men twice their age and size into the ground. He himself had to concentrate on their spars, and heaven forbid if he put them together against him. He shivered in memory of their last team spar. Anko was a protege, yes, but one that didn't want to be recognized as one, so she slinked through the ranks and was now a chunin. The man licked his lips in anticipation as he thought of his 2 main targets. On their ways home, Itachi looked at his best friend from the side of his eyes and shoved him into a hiding and giggling gaggle of fangirls that were debating whether or not to jump the Uchiha by using his friend as bait so he would come with them. Kidnapping, if you asked me. The Inuzuka yelled in outrage and struggled out of their grasp, and only by the thundering boom of his Niken did the gaggle let go of him and giggle their way back into their dark corner. The dog barked at her man-partner and licked his offered palm. Very funny, team. He scowled and petted his disfigured dog on the head. Disfigured being that on the day of the Kyuubi attack, Jet was thrown away by a stray tail when she was aiding her clan's men's Niken in evacuating the younger dog members of the clan. Most of the bones in her body were broken, but she would survive and half recover. The only part of her body that couldn't be salvaged was her lower jaw. The then vet sadly told him that Jet could still be a ninja dog after half a year of rehabilitation, but if they did not augment her jaw, then she would not function well in their dynamic team. The vets fixed an iron lower jaw onto his Niken, and the neat Inuzuka swore to his dog that day that it didn't change how she looked. It did. The fake jaw is still steel gray. It did change her bite force though. Now she could snap a man's back despite her relative size. He didn't have to carry her about because of the fact that Jet was growing faster than how his father told him his own Niken grew. It still surprised him that that same year was the Kyuubi attack. Aizen wore the Leaf Standard Jounin flak jacket, tight dark red long-sleeved undershirt, black A&BU pants with black ninja sandals. He also wore red fingerless gloves and a forehead protector that neatly contained his gelled and combed-down brown hair. As he walked up to his clan compound, he gave the smug Uchihas behind a parting kick before he hastily ran away, happy that he had one-upped his rival. He waved to his clanmates and proceeded to his house. He took off his sandals and entered the house. It wasn't as deeply incensed as when he was younger. He looked at the sandal area and noticed that his mother was still out on a mission and that it was only his father, and his partner, and home. He took off his flak jacket and hung it on the coat rack, took off his fingerless gloves and put it in the jacket's inside pocket. He and Jet instinctively walked straight to the backyard and sat beside Aizen's father. The sick man was given cleared by Tsunade that he was strong enough to go out and about, but now he had to go on a wheelchair. The man silently ruffled his hair and continued watching Fuji chase some rabbits his wife had purchased in case they ever got too bored. A novel lay on the arm of his wheelchair, unopened, showing that he was in deep thought. Both males sat in companionable silence, watching Fuji and her daughter chase after some of the rabbits. Silently, the man firmly grasped Aizen's shoulder and squeezed it. The next day, Itachi visited the clan compound and informed him that his sensei and their female teammate had defected and that they were on the retrieval team. He also told him that Orochimaru had tried to sneak into the clan compound and kidnap him, but luckily his father and Shursue's uncle were still in the clan head's house. They couldn't retrieve the other members of their team, but they did find the Yandame's 3-year-old son knocked out and blue-haired. Fast forward 6 years and we now find Itachi having a last spar with his best friend. After winning the match he slipped out knockout gas and both partners promptly passed out, only to wake up the next day and hear that their friend had murdered his whole clan. Sasuke was 6. Are you sure I'm the only one capable enough to be these kids' sensei? I'm what? 6 years older than them? Aizen said, imploring for the Yandame to choose someone else to be a team sensei. The blonde man sat back in his chair and answered, yes, but you are the best option we have with your years as a hunter ninja. The team I'm assigning you contains the best the class has to offer in terms of trackers. He slid a file forward and the Inuzuka caught and opened it. Aburame Minisaki, though in the middle of her class, still scores top marks in the academy's monthly tracking exams. This can be chalked up to her good enough control of her Kakaichu. He slid another file forward. Hyuga is the second best in taijutsu. His father says he has perfect control of his Byakugan. This time he threw the last file at the 18-year-old Jounin. Last is my son, Naruto. He is admittedly the best in taijutsu for a genin. Has shown to be a natural sensor with that strange bundle on his back and has a high affinity for water. I think you are the perfect sensei for this team. Of course I can't force you to take the team on. What do you say? Inuzuka Aizen thought through it. Now with Itachi gone and with his hunter ninja captain telling him that he had served long enough for a break, he needed something besides training to do. The rumors about bored Inuzuka were not rumors but facts. I accept, Hokage-sama. Good, your new team is waiting for you in the academy, room 22, top level. He was about to leave but Minato held up a hand, and keep an eye on Naruto for me, just in case he tries to run again. The Jounin bowed and walked out of the office with his companion. They entered the instructed room and the class went quiet. All looked at him wide-eyed, except his new team, Team 4 with me. He watched them with an amused smirk as they took him in with their eyes. If you're done ogling me, I'll meet you 3 in training ground 4 in 5 minutes. If you're late, you fail, and he shunned away. Chapter 5. Aizen stood at the edge of training ground 4 with Jet, counting down the seconds before he had to bring down the hammer onto his almost late but still unofficial team. 5, 4, 3, 2-thud. Boom! Right on time. Before him lay his appointed team in a heap of limbs. He assumed they had somehow come crashing down from the sky. He strode over purposefully and looked down at them as they blinked up at him nervously. He lightly kick-tapped with foot Minisaki's tangled leg and the whole mess of limbs abruptly separated and threw them away from each other. A second longer, and you would have failed even before you became a team. Joe shot to his feet and stood at attention, even adding a sharp salute. Permission to speak freely, Aizen-sensei. Said man chuckled at the boy's act, and from what he read in his academy file he was doing exactly what his parents told him to do but with a bit more fire. He patted the boy's head, laughing when the silver-haired Hyuga shook under his hand. Relax kid, no need to be so formal. For now just call me Aizen. We aren't a team yet. The boy silently looked at him, and you can speak freely. With all due respect, Tanbo-sensei said you were to be our team's sensei. Why are you saying we aren't a team yet? Naruto struggled to his feet and helped Minisaki up as well. He too looked at the man curiously. Yeah, how come? It may seem unofficial but it's a tradition for the team's sensei to test his or her genin before he could decide if they were ready for him or her to take them on. He paused to look over their surprised faces, or the Aburame girls' raised eyebrows. But before I give you my genin test, sit down and introduce yourselves. He first took the initiative by sitting down, and his Niken followed suit. The 3 genin sat down too and quietly looked at him. The young Jounin sighed. You go first, Miss Dark and Ominous. Tell us your name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, ambition. You know, things like that. Minisaki hummed disapprovingly and cleared her throat. My name is Aburame Minisaki. I like my clan, poetry, training with my hive, and she looked away and coughed out. Naruto, said boy, raised an eyebrow at how shy she was being. Not easily seen, but he knew the minute signs on her body, like the way her nose twitched every half minute. My dislikes are failing, illogical people, senseless logic. Among other things, she fixed her blue-framed glasses before she continued. I like training with my hive, writing poems, hanging out with Naruto, among other things. She ignored the rib jab Naruto sent her and punched his gut when he waggled his eyebrows. My ambition is to make my Gigi proud and to help Naruto accomplish his goals. She smirked at the boy who was still writhing on the ground. Very informative, Minisaki. Jet barked too in agreement. Your turn, Commander Hyuga Hitaki. Joe's chest puffed out in pride when his future sensei acknowledged his connection with his mother's dying clan. My name is Hyuga Joe, though you can interchange Hyuga with Hitaki if you want. I like my parents, training with my 2-san, learning and cooking. I greatly dislike people that discriminate. My hobbies are training and seeing how far and well my eyes can see. My ambition is to prove to everyone that I can be as good as any other ninja. Very good, kid, don't let anyone push you around. Joe nodded with a wan smile. Aizen looked at the yandame's son and sweat dropped when he saw his trying to dodge another gut punch from his obvious crush. The blow met him and he was again reduced to a writhing pile on the ground. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Tall, pale and very mysterious, you can tell us about yourself. Naruto immediately sat up as if he had never seen any pain in his life and said, My name is Namikaze Naruto. I like training with my sword, eating beef. He took his time to drool and was broken out of his cow meat-induced stupor by a sharp punch to his shoulder. He coughed and continued, I also like or love my younger brother and sister, and I really like Minisaki-chan. Said girl remained stoic sans the now burning red hue her face turned into. Steam escaped her ears when he took her hands. My hobbies are training with my sword, playing with my sister and brother, and hanging out with Minisaki-chan. My ambition is to be the best swordsman in the whole elemental nations. And here the clouds seemed to darken slightly and Naruto's blue hair shadowed his eyes. He bared his teeth and spat out, I plan on killing my uncle, no matter how long it takes me. The Aburame girl took his hand nonverbally and squeezed the limb gently. I didn't know you used the sword, Naruto. I do. I'll show you guys later if we pass. Agreeable. I also didn't know you had an uncle you wanted to kill. When I think you should know, I'll tell you. You do know as your superior I could command you to tell me who you plan to kill, right? You could try. Naruto leaned forward and smirked at the more experienced Jounin. Go ahead, I dare you. In the blink of an eye, Aizen flicked Naruto's forehead, sending the boy skidding a few feet away. Watch your tongue, kid. Not a Tsunade grade flick, but chakra can augment anything. He sat back and stroked Jet's head to cool her down. Your test, if you choose to take it, is to locate me and keep me in the general area for 40 minutes. You have till noon, which is in about 3 hours. Begin. The man and his Niken exploded in a cloud of thick smoke, and when it had finally settled he was nowhere in sight. What you did was out of line, Naruto-san, Joe said quietly. He faced where he knew the blue-haired boy was dusting himself off and frowned fractionally. It was a blatant show of disrespect to our superior in rank and in age. He's right, Naruto-kun, you were way out of line, the lone Aburame pointed out and Naruto's shoulders lowered. There are better ways to answer a question and you know that. I know. But let's forget about that for now and track that guy down. Agreed. Joe stood up and activated his Byakugan without the hand seals. I can't get a trace on his chakra trail. He must be a very good tracker to know how to hide his presence. The bugs I place on him are dead. The wrapped bundle on Naruto's back shook. My sword has a lock on his chakra but can't trace it. The Hyuga restrained himself looking into the bundle. He said that we should track him down and restrain him in the general area for 40 minutes, so that means he is a less popular, and maybe known place. Minisaki summarized smartly. Training ground or forest. That's true. He's an Inuzuka, so he needs some space before he can perform his clan's famed jutsu. All the forests in and around Konoha are too dense for one of their attack jutsu. So I think he's in a training ground. He's also very fast because he used a smoke bomb to escape, not a shadow clone. Naruto jumped into the analysis. I can keep up if he tries running again and distract him until you two show up. Saki-chan is wicked awesome with ranged attacks, so you stay back until you think you should jump in, and Joe, since you're a Hyuga, you can help me beat him up. Both his teammates nodded in agreement. First we run through all the training grounds till Samahata can sniff him out. Still keep your eyes active, Joe-san. The trio sped out of the training ground they were on and skimmed stealthily through the training grounds until they got to training ground 34. Their future sensei was idly sitting on the branch of a tree, swinging his legs while his Niken chased around some butterflies. The man stretched and smoothed down his gelled-down brown hair before he jumped down and waved to where the 3 genin were hiding out. Are you going to come out or are you going to stay there? His eyes briefly trailed to the timer on a tree stump at the center of the clearing. A tall blue blur shot out of the underbrush. It made to tackle the man, but Aizen easily stepped aside and tripped Naruto. He tutade and bent back from a fully powered Juken strike to his left arm. Naruto spun on his hands and used his legs to continually strike Aizen's raised arms. The strikes didn't hurt too much since his guard was up, but it was hard protecting himself from the spinning kicks and also dodge the gentle fist strikes at the same time. The tables would have been unfairly turned if Jet had joined in, but he told her to just observe them. He flicked his right leg, which removed Naruto's hands from the ground, and slid away smoothly from Joe's persistent attacks before he grabbed the boy's collar and chucked him back into his hiding place. The shark boy flipped to his feet and went straight for the figurative kill. He threw a chakra-powered punch at the Jounin's chest, which was easily slapped away, but the boy's quick thinking saved him because he used the momentum to slam his knees into the Jounin's stomach. Though it was more like a brush, he'd take what he could get. Aizen eyed the knee as it wafted past his stomach. Nice taijutsu, kid. He caught the rising kick from Joe and caught the chest jab from Naruto. You too. But you have to give me your all if you want to even dream of matching me. The man pushed them away and swore quietly when he had just remembered that there was a female in the genin team. He felt his chakra fluctuate heavily by the second, and he switched places with a log to save himself from any further onslaught on his chakra from the chakra-draining Kakaichu. Joe silently pointed out where the man was, and Naruto blurred over with the Hyuga following not too long later. There were great advantages that came from being born from the fastest man on the planet and a former Uzumaki Jinchuriki. The ultimate combination made him near hyperactive and very fast. The blue blur burst into the forest and was summarily tripped by the jounin. Kid, it's one thing to be fast and it's another to be good. The boy grunted and stood up just as his two other teammates came into the clearing. 3-on-1 isn't too fair. He folded his arms and stood to his full height. You guys really planned this out, huh? We just need 15 more minutes, the Abirame said in her usual wistful voice. Oh, you're actually keeping track of the time. He buffed his nails on his flak jacket nonchalantly. I've completely forgotten. The jounin was about to leap out of the clearing, but he stumbled on his feet when he noticed that the faint buzzing sound was coming from the chakra-draining beetles that formed a tight dome around them. Joe took the opportunity to run in and jab any visible tenketsu, but the man wasn't a former hunter ninja for nothing. He slapped the strikes away expertly and lightly palm struck the Hyuga's chest just in time to kick Naruto away and roll back from some bug fists. He threw a kunai at an incoming bug fist and detonated it immediately after. Aizen bent back from a roundhouse kick, but Naruto's follow-up kick nicked his jaw. Naruto fumbled when he realized that he had finally landed a blow, and Aizen capitalized by tripping him and throwing him into Minisaki. He lightly punched Joe's shoulder and chopped his hand into the other. The limb slumped as if it had fallen asleep. What did you do to my shoulder? Well, hidden pressure points. He chopped Joe's other shoulder and watched with amused satisfaction as he began panicking. Joe started hyperventilating and wobbling on his feet. Oh, relax, kid. It'll wear out in an hour. His arm shot out and grabbed Naruto's neck in a chokehold without the choke. And you? You run in without a well-thought-out plan. He lifted the boy high up and poked a pressure point on his legs before he threw him down. Then there was one. He leveled his gaze on the Abirame girl. I've got nothing. You're pretty chill. Minisaki ran at him at the same time the alarm sounded. The jounin caught her head, which stopped her in her tracks. Congratulations. You are the last mobile genin I am to take up. There is this last-minute thing we jounin senseis do. You have to pick only one person to be your teammate, while the other has to go back to the academy for another year. Who do you choose? The girl pulled back and nervously for an Abirame eyed the other genin who couldn't meet her gaze. Naruto coughed away from her. I don't want to put you in this position, Saki-chan, so you can pick Joe-san. I can always kill my uncle whenever I get out of the academy. No, I see how close you two are. You two would make a great team. Pick Naruto-san. It's more logical to choose who you know most. How can you prove to us that you're a great ninja if you have to go back to the academy for another year? I insist you pick him, Naruto said as he faced the Hyuga and frowned. That's the most logical thing to do. No, the most logical thing to do is to pick who you are familiar with. You two didn't know me before today, so I insist you pick Naruto-san. Joe too faced Naruto and frowned. Naruto grit his teeth to hold back the growl. No, I insist. No, I insist. Both were now butting heads and yipping at each other incoherently. Aizen rubbed his forehead and looked at the indecisive Abirame. What do you think? Who do you think would make this team strong? I don't know, she gulped. You know what? I'll go back to the academy. These two are stronger than me anyways. Jed boomed out a bark that quietened the two fighters and the fidgeting Abirame. That's enough. You all pass, okay? The effect was instantaneous. Naruto and Joe broke apart from their legless tussle, and Minisaki glared at him from behind her glasses. I'm not a team player. Well, anyone besides with Jet. But I know as a fact that if a teammate sacrifices himself so his other teammate could go on, it's admirable. You all did noble things today. A wise, old man's old student once told me that those who abandon the mission are trash, but those that abandon their teammates are worse than trash. I think that's how he said it. Whatever, in summary, you all pass. Go back to training ground 4 tomorrow 6 a.m. sharp for your first official day of training. Dismissed. A smoke bomb later and the new sensei and his dog partner were gone. The clearing was quiet. Then, like a burst of fire, Naruto and Minisaki dived at each other into a strong hug. The girl allowed herself a wide smile as she and her friend jumped around the clearing. The duo blocked everything that was happening around them as they smashed their lips together. Well, the girl forgot that she had on her nose long coat, so it was more like he kissed her coat, but after a flustered separation she fumbled with the zipper, and when it was down to her neck their mouths connected in a short, chaste kiss. Joe raised an eyebrow as the two separated and back away so that he wouldn't spoil the two couples' moment. Besides, it reminded him of the times his parents got too romantic in front of him. The results were sleepless nights and paranoia. And, I hear you, dude. Back to our new couple. Naruto and Minisaki were red-faced and for some reason couldn't keep their eyes away from each other. Well, the Abirame was still wearing her glasses, but you know what I mean. Naruto pulled her to him and pecked her again. I found this great place at the edge of the marketing district yesterday that served food and entertained guests with poetry. I can take you there tonight if you want. She lightly gnawed her black lipstick-covered lower lip in anticipation. Would it be cool? The food's good and the people there are nice enough. She kissed him lightly and her smile stretched a bit more than I guess I could go. She hesitated before she continued. Would an us be cool? He leaned down a bit so their foreheads could touch. I'm good with there being an us. I actually thought we were an us a week after we met. She giggled airily. Me too. Her pale index finger trailed over a gray streak on his black and gray sleeveless shirt before she idly stroked his bandaged arms. His eyebrows furrowed at that. It was a nervous habit he knew when she wanted to tell him something but found it hard to get it out of her mouth. He gently took her hands. What's wrong? How? She cleared her throat and began again. How are we going to tell Gigi? Oh yeah. Samahata's unrestrained giggles filled the forest not long after his thought. Chapter 6. Let me at her. Let me at her. Naruto yelled madly as he tried to pull away from the surprisingly strong grasp of the Hyuga. Meow. Look. She called me fat. I'm not fat, Aizen-sensei. Tell her I'm not fat. Wanting to humor the child, the experienced hunter ninja turned Jounin-sensei turned to the cat and said, Naruto said I should tell you he's not fat, Tora. Meow. Why you little. The shark boy tried to pull away again, but the silver-haired Hyuga rolled his eyes and pulled him back by the collar of his shirt. She called me ugly. Why aren't you guys doing anything to defend my honor? The Aburame allowed a ghost of a smirk to cross her face as she watched her boyfriend squirm in Joe's very strong hold. Maybe because you can't speak cat. It was she that had been assigned to hold the cat back. Joe was in charge of Naruto, and Aizen hated cats. The feline tried swiping his claws at her, but she moved her hands away. Naruto's declaration of war against Tora started on the first day he and his team had been assigned to catch the Fire Daimyo's wife's cat. It was meant to be fast and less troublesome, with all members of the team being able to track the cat's smell, and only the Aburame had a way to catch it. Her hive. In Tora's defense, Naruto smelled too much like a fish. The cat kept taking bites at the boy and running to hide when Naruto turned around. But what broke the boy and had him swear revenge at the cat was when Tora had bitten him down there. The destruction that day was catastrophic. The Yandame's bad influence of a son tore after the cat, with the flexible creature dodged every jutsu the boy threw, and every clone he summoned. Thus a rivalry almost compared to the Sandame's and Shimura Danzo's was born. Aizen rolled his eyes and slapped the boy behind the head. Calm down, idiot. It's just a cat. Meow meow me meow. Naruto froze and gasped. How dare you? You have gone too far. Behind him, Hyuga Joe could not get any more amused. This was more drama than when his mother was pregnant for his little brother. Meanwhile, Minisaki stifled her laughter by tightly closing her lips. The side of her eyes were well hidden behind her glasses, so no one noticed the way they crinkled. Naruto began struggling anew. She called me ugly, fat and stupid. How dare you? That's enough, Naruto, the team sensei said between chuckles. He tried to put a stern face on and face the cat. Apologize to him, cat. The sassy cat relaxed on her haunches and looked away. Mio. Good. She didn't apologize. The man slapped the boy behind his head again and proceeded to lead his team to the Kage's tower to drop of the troublesome feline. I don't care. Now let's go and get rid of that creature so I can dismiss you lot. He ignored Tora's outraged meow and kept walking, his team diligently following after him. What startled the citizens of Konoha that they passed by on their way to their village leader's office was that the Yandame's good-for-nothing son was arguing with the too cool cat that ignored his yells of say it to my face, nip for brains. Just when they had thought they were used to the blue-haired boy's outburst and quirky behavior, he would come around again and twist their brains. It was just best to ignore him as best as you can. But it was hard to ignore a 12-year-old boy losing an argument with a prissy cat. When they had finally gotten to the tower and handed the cat to the overly loving daimyo's wife, all bore witness to the rival's customary goodbye of, I know where you live, and Tora pointing two claws at her eyes and pointing those claws at Naruto. Big bro? The shark boy was still looking at the closed door until he felt his pants leg being pulled, the person asking for attention. He looked down and beamed at his little brother and sister looking up at him with wide eyes, possibly unblinking eyes. What you doing here, squirts? He looked at his father, who was behind his desk observing the interaction. From the side of his eyes, you should be in the academy. Iruka-sensei dismissed us early. The little boy, Himoji Namikaze, had short red hair that spiked up. He was a healthy academy-age boy with a temper only his mother could be proud of. His twin sister, Hitomi Namikaze, had smooth blonde hair that fell over her shoulders neatly. She was the more lax of the duo, with the way her eyes almost always looked half-lidded and how she slinked in her walk. What she made up in her general relaxed look she made up in intelligence. Her IQ was said to rival the resident Nara child in her class. Right now, though, she was staring up at him, with her foul-tempered twin, wide-eyed and raptly. There was also this other quirk the duo had. He said we have a test on the basic henge. Himoji continued. Tomorrow, Hitomi finished. They finished each other's sentences. Of course, when they were together, and speaking to the same person or group of people. It was something Naruto was still trying to get used to. Naruto blinked and tried to process what they were asking him to do. You want me to help you two practice? Both precarious twins nodded in sync. I'll help when I get home. Both twins smiled happily and began bouncing on the balls of their feet. Are you going to show us any cool jutsu? This time it was Himoji that finished the sentence. Naruto scratched his cheek and shrugged. Sure, why not? The two barreled into him for a hug and scampered out of the large office. The shark boy dusted his hands and grinned at his teammates, who were looking at him curiously. What? Minisaki rolled her eyes and nudged past him. We're already dismissed, Naruto-kun. Aizen waved to his genin team and shunshined out of the office while Joe simply smiled and left the room. Where are you going then? She hurried after her and both walked side by side down the street, Naruto's tall figure almost intimidating to the children that scampered around them playing ninja, the bandaged bundle at his back adding to his mysteriously strong persona. Minisaki reached for his hand and held it between them. I won't be able to see you for a while. My grandfather is teaching me advanced formations and he says my concentration is very important if I don't want my hive rebelling. She said all this in her quiet breathy voice as they walked down the almost noisy market district to the secluded Aburame clan compound that was situated near the forest. But Naruto caught all she said, very much used to tuning his ears to hear her voice. How long are we talking about? He frowned and she smiled serenely, squeezing his hand lightly. 3 months or so. The shark boy caught the barely noticeable waver in her voice. It's fine. He pulled her into a side hug as they stopped before the Aburame clan compound. Does sensei know? She shifted in his arm and hugged him fully. With him being a full head taller than her, she fitted her head under his chin. She nodded. You'll do great, Saki-chan. You think so? I know so. He pulled back and kissed her forehead. Now I think you better head on inside or your grandfather's gonna flay me alive. The girl giggled softly and zipped down her nose-high coat. She stood up on her tiptoes and planted a full-lipped kiss on him, almost literally making fireworks go off inside Naruto's head. Don't flirt with anyone, ya hear? She spied her cool grandfather at the gate, somehow already knowing she was close. Maybe it was because of one of his kakaichu that she had on her. Come on, Saki-chan, I'm 12, what's the worst that could happen? He grinned widely, exposing his serrated shark teeth to the world. She rolled her eyes and kissed him again, this time a shorter one. I miss you already. She was about to kiss him again, but stopped halfway when she heard a curt cough beside them. The Aburame pulled away and fully zipped up her coat before she waved slightly and entered the compound, leaving the sweating Yandame's son and the overly cool Aburame grandfather. It was silent for a full 5 minutes before the much older man hummed quietly, If you hurt her, I hurt you. Do you understand, child? He said those words so coolly, so calmly, so quietly Naruto could have passed it off as a compliment on his physique if he didn't know who exactly was talking. He snapped into a sharp salute, eliciting low buzzing-like chuckles from the gatekeepers. Crystal Meiji-san, the man, not in the least bit amused, nodded and walked briskly into the clan compound. Whoa! Naruto quietly slipped into the Kage's mansion that afternoon, making sure not to bang the door shut. He took a deep breath and tiptoed towards the stairs leading to his room, which meant he had to pass the living room first. Naruto? The blue-skinned boy refrained from groaning before he swiveled around and bowed politely to his mother. Kao-san, the woman was whiling away the time by reading a magazine. She hastily stood up and dusted her casual dress idly. How was training? Are you hungry? There's some ramen in the kitchen. I can go and get you a bowl if you want, the boy responded negatively. Oh, what about I help you out with your taijutsu? You always did say it was giving you problems. That was a long time ago. My taijutsu is okay now. When the woman's eyes dropped and her shoulders sagged, realization came upon the boy what she was trying to do. She was trying to reconnect with him. Kushina slowly sat back down. Oh, Naruto tried not to glare at her when they saw a small yellow flash at the door, and she reverted back to her plain-faced self. The boy clenched his fists and stomped to the backyard. He smoothly raised his right hand over his shoulder and clenched the legendary sentient sword, ready to decimate the seal-augmented training dummies in the Kage Mansion training ground/backyard. Before he could will the sword to frill out, shredding the bandage covers, and bring it down on the nearest dummy, he heard someone speak. Big brother? He froze in his tracks and clenched his teeth in frustration. His sword wasn't really a secret anymore to the ninja populace, and the only hitch had been when the Yandame had tried to take it from him. Let's just say, Samahata was less than pleased. He stayed in that position for a full minute, seemingly frozen in time and mute rage before he felt both his pants legs being lightly tugged, the person, or persons, asking for his full attention. Big bro, this time it was Himoji that spoke, being the sibling that he was, that is impatient and snarky. He tugged Naruto's leg again. I know you're not a statue, big bro. The shaving sword bearer snorted and let go of his sword, mentally willing it to calm down. He looked down and was again met with wide purple eyes that looked up at him possibly, again, unblinkingly. He stiffly rolled shoulders and ruffled their hairs, eliciting groans of frustration from his little siblings. Let's see what you've got. The Yandame's children spent the rest of the day practicing their transformations, of Naruto helping his younger siblings with their henge. The next day, after dropping Hitomi and Himoji in the academy, and untangling himself from the students that insisted on showing them neat jutsu, going against their parents' orders for them to stay away, we find Naruto walking leisurely to Training Ground 4, his team's official training ground. He got to the training ground and sat down beside a tree, closing his eyes and inhaling deeply a few times. 5 minutes later his male teammate, Joe Hyuga, the current begrudging Hyuga protege, sat down beside him. Both genin were quiet before they tensed, hearing a thundering bark from above them. Damn it, sensei! Even though both genin couldn't sense the man or his Niken, they didn't make any move to defend themselves. The hunter ninja and his canine partner jumped down in front of the two overly relaxed boys. Good morning, young ones. Naruto opened an eye and looked at his sensei. The man seemed unusually peppy, which was saying something since the man was rarely ever seen in a negative mood, since he was unusually seen with a neutral expression or a small grin on his face. The shark boy sniffed deeply and furrowed his eyebrows and thought, You finally got laid? Joe snickered into his hands, his pale eyes watering. Nope. He said it so happily both boys would have thought that the man was genuinely happy he was still a virgin, an 18-year-old virgin male ninja, a rarity in the shinobi world that both boys and girl picked up when they caught their sensei blushing, lightly, after being shoulder-checked by a hot, civilian woman. In Naruto's humble opinion her rear end was fairly lookable until Minisaki slapped the back of his head. The Hyuga protege rubbed his eyes with his bandaged wrists, rubbing out the tears. Then what, sensei? You two are going to fight? This was a month after the team had been formed and both boys had yet to spar against each other. They had been doing team exercises and tracking gauntlets, not spars. Fight? Don't you mean spar? Joe asked, fully attentive. Nope. I want an all-out battle between you two. Are you sure? I've got samahata. The man hummed to himself. Well then, don't use it, just keep it on you as a weight or something. Okay. Naruto stood up, so did Joe, and both boys stretched. Any day, boys. It was Joe that first walked to the center of the training ground and Naruto followed not far behind. They stood about 8 feet apart, blankly looking at each other. Then the Yandame's oldest child's face stretched into a terrifying grin and Joe smirked faintly. His Byakugan flared to life zealously. As one, both took their stances, Joe taking the advanced stance for the Juken and Naruto taking the advanced stance for the mist swordless taijutsu style. Naruto's face smoothed over till it was almost neutral, save the almost perceived upward twitch of his lips. Aizen coolly walked between them and looked at each boy slowly. You know the rules. All goes except your sword, Naruto. They nodded. The 18-year-old sensei raised his right hand. Naruto Namikaze versus Joe Hyuga. He brought it down in a sharp chop. Begin. Surprising enough, it was Joe that rocketed to his opponent with raised hands. Naruto's eyes widened as he leaned back completely and watched in horror as the Hyuga's chakra became faintly visible as it wafted above his face. I shouldn't let him touch me, he thought quickly as he righted himself and raised a leg, dodging a Juken strike narrowly. He snap-kicked Joe on the shoulder and leaned away from a powered strike to the shoulders. He got the first tag in. The blue-haired Namikaze hissed in pain when the faint blue chakra of the Hyuga wafted past his left shoulder. Under his clothes there was a small trail of blisters that smoothed over a minute later. He ducked an aggressive strike to the neck and rammed both his fists into the silver-haired Hyuga's unprotected belly. The victim's mouth puffed out with air, restraining himself from yelling. Joe used the momentum of Naruto's strike to bring his left leg up in a particularly ungraceful kick to the chest. Naruto let out an oomph and flipped away, giving the boy space, and at the same time Joe didn't channel any chakra to the strike. He ran to the silver-haired boy and leaped into the air, his right fist raised and brought it down on the Hyuga's crossed arms. Joe then kneed the Namikaze in the stomach and attempted another strike, this time to the chest, but had to jump back from a vicious snap kick. Joe kept flipping back when water drills smashed around him. He stepped on a tree and coolly flipped over a drill. His Byakugan blazed around when he didn't see Naruto before him. He cursed though when 3 water clones dropped around him. The strikes that ensued happened blazingly fast and the counter strikes and blocks just as fast. Joe sidestepped an axe kick and struck the leg, but the clone's body part was moved away just in time. The Hyuga, without turning around, threw an elbow at a clone, creating a massive welt on his head. The Hyuga glared mutely after that, mechanically blocking and countering every strike. Naruto had to have pumped in a lot of chakra into the clones so he wouldn't easily see where he really was. Clever. He jumped over a clone, jabbing his neck as it flew under him and dispelling it. He then spun in the air and savagely kicked another under his chin, dispelling it as well, leaving the original. You are very strong, Naruto-san. Both boys weren't unscathed. Joe's arm bandages had been shredded up and his shirt had nasty slash marks through them, and Naruto's shirt was also almost in tatters. The Namikaze's arm fins were fully out and humming with dangerous water chakra. You too. Naruto raised both his arms up and thrust them to Joe in a slashing motion. Barely visible blue chakra sliced out of the fins. To counter this, Joe went through the same motion, but he yelled out a jutsu, wind release, leaf blower. The jutsu, made up of sharp white air, smashed against Naruto's attack, throwing both boys away harshly. Both genin crashed into the ground and skidded on their backs, stopping not too long after. The training ground was silent, until Naruto staggered out of his crater and stumbled forward to the Hyuga, visibility low with all the dust in the air. Joe met the Namikaze and, aided by his Byakugan, struck the blue-haired boy's shoulder. In response, Naruto savagely sent an uppercut to the Hyuga's chin, lifting him off the ground slightly. Not giving up, Joe brought his elbow down on Naruto's head, dazing the victim but not stopping him from smashing his fist on Joe's belly. More blindingly followed. Blood spurted out of the Hyuga protege's mouth as his back met a tree. Naruto glared silently and held a razor-sharp and dangerously humming fin up to Joe's neck. Forfeit. Joe, when the Hyuga glared back, he pressed his arm a little bit more into his neck. A small trail of blood flowing out. I'm not going to repeat myself. That's enough. Winner, Naruto Namikaze. Aizen yelled from behind them. Slowly Naruto allowed his fins to slide back in, and he stepped away from Joe. The Hyuga boy rubbed his slowly bleeding neck with his left hand and blankly looked at his male teammate. Joe tentatively lifted his right hand for a handshake and Naruto clasped the hand. Nice fight. Yes, nice fight. I'm sure Joe needs to go and get his wounds checked. You too, Naruto. So training is off until next week. Dismissed. And he and his dog exploded into a cloud of smoke. Let me help you to the hospital, Joe. And both genins slowly limped out of the training ground to the village's hospital. Chapter 7. Time skip. 2 years later. We're being followed, Minisaki muttered to her sensei as the team tree hopped back to Konoha at a leisurely pace. The man nodded with a grim expression. I know. I can't get a good lock on his or her strength from behind me, seeing as he used his sense of smell. Can't do that, Naruto. Joe, Jet made sure to keep up her pace like she too hadn't sensed the person on it. The boys whispered and spread out while placing on their headpieces and tuning into the team's channel. The densely packed trees were shrouding the person's chakra and nature chakra, but there was something the person didn't count on. Joe could see miles behind him, and Naruto could connect his senses with his sentient sword to boost his natural senses. Like using echolocation, but different. The team were returning from Waterfall Village, donning freshly minted Konoha Chunin flak jackets and feeling incredibly confident in their abilities. The only paved way to get to and from Konoha and Waterfall was by passing close to the edge of a cliff that the two villages shared, but the team were much too excited to take the scenic route, so they chose to cut through the forest dividing the two villages. Now apparently they had a tail. Naruto placed a finger to his headpiece and said, "Female, high lightning chakra affinity, swordswoman." Joe added in what his eyes could see, "Looks to be in her late 20s, Kirigakure forehead protector, Joun in flak jacket." Ended. Did she just wink at me? Naruto briefly closed his eyes as he soared from one branch to the other, opening them again as his foot touched down on his intended branch. He held the half-ram hand seal, and Samahata stiffened as sound waves from far behind him bounced back from tree to tree and entered his ears. As more and more sounds came to him, his brain began forming a mental image of her, starting from the base, which was her skeletal system, to her whole body. "She wasn't winking at you, Joe," he sighed, and Aizen easily deduced what he was talking about. "We have another Kiri swordsman problem? We have a 7 swordsman of the mist problem." "Just one swordsman this time," Naruto replied through his receiver and changed his direction. "Follow me." The team followed after him, so did the tail, and he landed in a spacious part of the forest where a large natural lake could be seen and lush grass was sparely spread around, though hard soil dominated the glade. Naruto took off his receiver and stuffed it into a side bag, the second one in 2 years. "That's a good thing, right?" Minisaki asked quietly as she looked over at Naruto, who took off his bag and tossed it to her. She caught it and slung it across her body, opposite her own side bag. "Zabuza didn't really give you that big of a problem." A large sweat drop grew on the back of Naruto's head and he chuckled with his hands behind his neck. Minisaki always had a way with words. He did best Zabuza in a straight-up Kiri-style all-out fight, but it did give him a problem, especially seeing as Zabuza had been born and trained in the place he, Naruto, was learning from second-hand knowledge style. It all just came down to speed and being smart. Naruto was better with Samahata, that fact was certain, but he still had a niggling feeling of doubt in him, something his girlfriend knew all about. She helped boost his confidence whenever the time came, like right now. The Aburame clenched her hands into fists and continued, "I'm pretty sure you can handle this chick." Aizen slowly smirked and spoke, "I mean you're getting better using that thing." The boy looked at his sensei with dull, sarcastic eyes, and the man sent him a thumb up before he took a seat at the far side of the glade on the grass. Jet sat down beside her partner. He found out from Naruto that there was a sort of induction test whenever a new member of the 7 Swordsmen of Mist appeared. They had been lucky to have only met Zabuza so far, and that was during a misranked mission to Wave. The boy got more practice in, and he knew much more than he did that time. "You can do it, Naruto-san," Joe said as he briefly bowed and firmly shook Naruto's hand. He then leaned in and whispered, "And don't worry, we'll step in before she kills you." Naruto sighed in relief. "Thank you." The Hyuga nodded and went to sit over with his sensei, leaving only Minisaki and Naruto before the swordswoman landed in the glade. Electricity crackled in her wake. She was a white-haired lady with small pouty red lips and black-lined eyelashes. She was in a long-sleeved blue shirt with her hands in brown elbow-long gloves. She was in tight black pants with black sandals. At her sides were a pair of swords that briefly crackled with electricity. She had a sly smile on her face as she approached Naruto. Minisaki walked over as well and stood beside Naruto with her chin raised in a defiant pose. The woman licked her lips seductively, something that made the Aburame clench her hands tighter and unsettled the bugs that lived in her. The bearer of the twin lightning swords, Kiba, was the one that broke the tense silence. "I knew you would look good, but I didn't think you looked this good." She lifted her right hand to simply touch Naruto's neck gills, but a sharp slap from the boy's girlfriend pushed it back down. The woman now had a vicious smirk plastered on her face, even growling menacingly, but the Aburame wasn't afraid. She puffed out her modestly sized breasts, wrapped tightly in bandages, and butted heads with the swordswoman. "And who might you be?" she said in a silky soft voice. "His girlfriend, bitch." This was the moment Naruto chose to intervene before blood was shed. "Okay, I think that's enough." He slipped between them and pushed them apart. The woman looked at the hand on her shoulder, his hand, and then slowly looked up at him with hooded eyes. She grabbed his fingers and laced hers in them. I like you already?" "The books say you're strong for your age and you look absolutely delicious." She licked her red lips, seduction thick in the air. "How about we cancel our fight and go on a date?" "Not sure you've noticed, but I have a girlfriend." He refrained from swallowing thickly at the sheer amount of arousal he could sense rolling off her. His Aburame girlfriend watched this patiently, gauging Naruto's reaction. "And please stop with the flirting." "Forget about her." He raised an eyebrow at the impossible thought of forgetting about Minisaki, and she could see it wouldn't happen. "How about this? I can share you with her, but you'll prefer me, I promise." That was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. The push that opened the gates of hell, the gong that called the wolves to feast, the siren that woke up the beast. The quiet, mellow and down-to-earth Aburame girlfriend, who was incredibly proud of the fact that she had a nice guy as a boyfriend and who would also rather have her hive ripped out of her living body than share her man with anyone else, did something she will never regret. She punched the Miss Swordswoman square on the face. There was even a quiet crunch. The blow flung the surprised swordswoman, who wasn't used to surprises, once before she righted herself mid-air and landed on her feet. She wasn't happy, and she made this fact clear when she unsheathed her twin swords, lightning crackling around her menacingly before she dashed over to the offending, but at the same time offended girl. "Who the fuck do you think you are?" she yelled as she zipped to the bug girl and brought down her sword, but it clanged off Naruto's back, where the chakra-draining sword was sheathed, and the lightning was summarily sucked out, but she cancelled the jutsu before it took all of her chakra. Meanwhile, Naruto, who had used his body to block the killing blow, was busy trying to hold the bug girl down, who was trying to jump over him to tackle the older female. The boy stored this piece of information in his mind to remind her later. It was adorable when he saw her jealous, even the smaller signs. This was by far the worst case of jealousy he had ever seen from her. The Namikaze might have been 14, but he had been told he looked at least 16, given his height and his wide shoulders, still a head taller than Minisaki, half a head taller than Joe but level with Aizen. He was also fairly good looking. He would usually get passes from the females of other villages, not usually Konoha, and she would clearly show her place as his girl by holding his hand and sometimes growling at the. Some of them usually backed off, some others would go a bit further and openly try and seduce the boy, and Minisaki would go a bit further and quietly whisper death threats. Before the women got the message and left, this usually worked on civilians. The kunoichi would leave as soon as the Abirame dragged her boyfriend into an open-mouth kiss, decency be damned. But this older, attractive, and very expressive woman got under her skin more than the other competition because she was well aware of the fact that Naruto was taken and she had brought up the option of sharing him. No. Oh hell no. Naruto laughed as she jumped, but he caught her and placed her back down. This didn't stop her from exchanging heated, offensive, usually un-Minisaki kind of words with the woman. "Who the hell do you think you are, you damn whore? I'm the third best swordsman in the 7 swords, bitch. Do I look like I fucking care?" The girl had now abandoned all self-control and was pointing at herself before she pointed at her source of rage. "Do I look like I fucking care?" The woman, who still hadn't introduced herself, jabbed her own finger over Naruto's shoulder, careful not to touch the bandage wrap on his back. "If I get my hands on you, I will tear your tongue out and push it straight up your pee. Alright. Okay. That's more than enough," Naruto yelled and pushed the girl, who wasn't as strong as him, back. "You know what? I changed the 7 swordsman wager from your sword to her life. If I win, I get to kill her. You watch me kill her." And then her rage-filled expression morphed into one of love, possibly the first of its kind for her, and she placed a hand over her beating heart. "You will be my boyfriend forever, or until we get married," she chirped. Naruto's amused face was wiped off his face at that moment, and replaced with that of horror. The girl in his arms had stopped struggling. She was hugged close to his heart so she could hear it beat quickly at the thought of her being killed and being forced to watch it. At that time she remembered her role as his supporter, the person that boosts his confidence. "You can do it. She's not nearly as strong as you." He looked at her with soft blue eyes and nodded before he led her to his teammate and team sensei. "Glad you guys were entertained," he said sarcastically as they were busy eating ration bars. They did manage to say their own encouragements through their stuffed mouths as he walked back to the swordswoman. The usual wager of the 7 swordsmen was that when a new member was found, and they had been given a sword, then, if the person won, he moved up a rank in the 7 swordsmen strongest. If he impressed his opponent but lost, he would keep his sword, stay in his rank, and also be able to make a request. But if it was a clear loss, then the person would have his sword stripped from him, Samahata, Kiba or not, and killed immediately for even dreaming of being in their ranks. These wagers could vary by what the challenger wants, but only as long as the challenged also brought forward his own condition. Naruto rolled his neck and unstrapped his sentient sword, still in its bandages, and said, "But if I win, you will be my servant." He squeezed the handle of his weapon strongly. "For the rest of your life." His face was almost emotionless as he said this. The woman shrugged. "I can handle that." She twirled her swords in her hand once and held one in a reverse grip while the other was pointed at him. "By the way, my name is Amuri Ringo." The boy didn't respond, rather he got his massive sword into the position the scrolls had taught him, pointed downwards with one hand and having his legs in a ready position. A mental switch went off and they both dashed at each other as fast as they could run and smashed their weapons against the other. Lightning arced over Amuri and Naruto's blue hair flared up along with his arm fins. Chapter 8. Both swords slashed against the other with blurring speed, throwing hot arcs of lightning around them and burning the low grass to ashes. This went on until they slammed weapons and stared at each other. Amuri winked coyly and Naruto's eyebrow twitched in irritation. They pushed away, especially when Naruto commanded Samahata to fill out its purple scales and Amuri dragged her blades away as the purple sword started sucking out her chakra through her twin blades, landing a few yards apart. Deep breathe, Naruto closed his eyes for the briefest of moments, and his blue arm fins slid out, humming with potent water chakra. He felt a gentle prod on his mind and he opened the gate for his sword to fully connect with him, and his eyes snapped open, spinning within itself with the rage of a whirlpool. "Let's do this." Squeal! The Fang sword user squinted at her opponent suspiciously as the boy closed his eyes. She clasped her swords tightly and ran at him, the sword in her left hand curving upwards while the one in her right stabbed forward, just in time for Naruto's eyes to open, and she briefly prevented herself from losing her footing at the sheer amount of violence he had in his eyes. The younger swordsman crossed his blade across his body and a short power tussle ensued as they both shoved against each other, but the taller and more muscled Namikaze won but slid his left leg away from an arc of lightning that scorched the ground. He sliced another arc out of the air with his purple sword, stabbed forward at another arc, and the serrated teeth of his sentient sword opened wide, swallowing the bolt of electricity whole and spitting out a combination of water and lightning at the attacker. Naruto followed the combined bolt to its intended victim and watched, rapt, as she swatted the jutsu aside and smoothly spun under his overhead cut, spinning under his outstretched arm, and twirled the Fang blade in her left hand before stabbing it into Naruto's side, eliciting a shocked yell from his Aburain girlfriend. "Naruto-kun!" She called and got to her feet, but her teacher, Aizen Inuzuka, held her leg in place and simply said, "Look!" Naruto's eyes widened fractionally at the fluidity of the lightning user's attack and at how easily she had gotten the first tag, but what she had not counted on was the advantage of having Samehada that no other person besides the sword's former users provided. No one was sure where Samehada was from or how it was created, but a major component of its biological makeup was from a kind of shark called the owl shark. The owl shark did not have any eyes, merely a mouthful of sharp, deadly teeth, but it made use of echolocation to find its prey, mainly smaller sharks and a few mammals that ventured into his territory in the water, with twice the accuracy of a person using their eyes. After Naruto had been proficient enough to hold his sword in one hand without falling over, he was deemed ready to have this connection with his blade. The joint ability couldn't predict the future, but it could predict the main probability of the future with only an 83% success rate. He sucked in his belly, and the lightning blade sliced into his clothes and fried the area around his stomach enough for him to easily leap away to gather his bearings. He puffed out a relieved breath and focused back on his opponent, who was licking her lips slowly, enjoying how much he was impressing her so far. A slow, irritated sneer crossed over his face, and he shot back to her, pushing his legs to flash through the air fast enough to force her to cross her blades against themselves to block a smash aimed at her head. The boy kicked her midsection and swiped his right fin at her airborne body. A sharp trail of water shot from his fin and went after her. The woman pointed at the wave and blasted numerous bolts of lightning at it, destroying it and allowing her to land on her feet safely. Naruto again mesmerized her by leaping straight at her and bringing his sword down on her. The woman leaned away in time with her arms stretched forward, under his arms, but was forced to make a quick decision as Naruto pulled his arms back. Naruto's fins honed towards her fingers. Either she made a gamble and shrouded her fingers in lighting in hopes that he would be fried on contact, or let go of her blades. Time moved at a crawl as she looked between the fins and back to Naruto, trying to decide. The sheen of buzzing chakra covering Naruto's fins forced her to make up her mind, and she let go of her blades. The blue-haired swordsman smirked at his achievement. "Let's see how you fight without your swords, lady." A foot was plated into her unprotected stomach and she skidded away, separated from her swords as they clanged onto the ground. She smirked right back and flexed her right hand, with her left on the ground to stop her from sliding too far away. "I don't need to hold my swords to use them." She snapped her fingers and the twin swords levitated into the air, glowing with power, and bolted to Naruto. The teen had not anticipated this, but he went along with something he had been working on with Samehada if it ever happened. He stabbed the hilt of his sword into the ground and ran at the incoming woman, his left fin leading and clashing against the kunai she had whipped out from her weapon's pouch. "Cover me, just like we practiced," growled Wolf. "Yes, that plan." Samehada elongated from its position in the ground and swatted the blades in the air away from Naruto's back, while its wielder was in a deadly dance of fins and kunai with the experienced swordswoman, who had pulled out another kunai when he added his other hand to the mix. Sparks flew over them as the limited lightning chakra in her short blades clashed with his water chakra, scorching the ground after each slice. He ducked a knife to his forehead and threw his palm at her chest. She slapped his attack away with a stylish spin and slammed her leg against his shoulder. The boy used the contact to grab onto her leg with a firm hand and drove her into the ground by sweeping her foot from under her and brought down a heel kick to her head, which she quickly blocked by her crossed arms, seeing as she knew her kunai would shatter upon impact. Her back hit the ground and he refused to release her leg as he twisted the limb in his grasp and solidly kicked her knee. He heard a crack and her eyes widened in alarm. Amiri gritted her teeth in pain, the sheer amount of it evident in her eyes, and she smashed her other leg on Naruto's neck. The merciless kick wrenched his hands from her leg and cast him away like a stone skipping on water several feet away from her. Above them, her twin swords was battling against the elongated and fiendishly grinning purple sword. The purple sword was immune to every lighting attack, but the fact that he was against two blades was what made it ensure it kept his focus on both at the same time. One would attack head-on and the other would attempt to uproot him from the ground. He constantly had to backtrack to ward away the second sword and return to keep the first blade's attention on him rather than on his master's fight. Naruto growled lowly as he huffed to his feet, blood seeping from the corner of his lips as he glared at his female opponent. The woman wobbled onto her feet, but surprisingly enough, kept the broken leg off the ground and bounced on one foot, her hands in a classic kickboxing position. Amiri grinned, exposing her signature serrated teeth. "You want a fist fight?" The boy didn't answer her, Rather, he barreled straight back and both entered a complicated sequence of attacks and counters, returning back to attack and smoothly shifting back to counters, only leaving openings long enough to tempt them to poke, but these holes were closed like trap doors for the person to counter. Naruto's right knee shot up and she pushed it back down with her right palm, leading a punch to his face with her other hand, but the shark boy moved his head away from the blow and swung around to slam his fist onto the side of Amuri's head. Though she raised her left palm up to block the attack, gripped his attack in her outrageously strong hands, pulled him closer and drove her head straight down at his exposed elbow, breaking it cleanly. She used the opening from his gasp of pain to head butt him between his eyes, breaking his nose, and opening her free hand to palm strike in the center of his chest. Blood exploded from his mouth as he stumbled backwards twice and he fell onto a knee, and the older fighter capitalized on this by hopping forward once and swinging his limp leg at him, connecting with his chin and snapping his head up. More blood sprayed out of his mouth as he landed on his back. This time Aizen had to stand up to hold his Aburaim student down, preventing her from running towards her boyfriend of 3 years, technically 4. She yelled his name, horrified that he didn't move and fearing the worst. Her cries rang through the air as Joe helped Aizen hold her back, astonished that the normally cool girl had thrown away all composure and replaced it with utter grief. Tears cascaded down her pale cheeks as she desperately clawed at her friend, Joe, just to go to her first friend. She didn't care that if he lost she would die, all she cared about was that he didn't die. Naruto! Amuri savored her rival's desperate screams. I guess you lose, handsome, the woman said to him as she hopped to him on one leg. Can't say I'm not impressed though. This scuffle's got me all sweaty. I actually had to give you 100%, or I'd be a lot worse off right now. She tiredly kept hopping to him and idly spun her kunai on her pointer finger. You have to live with the constant thought that you weren't strong enough to protect your precious girlfriend. I'm sorry for that, I really am, but I'm not sorry about killing her. I will enjoy every moment of it. The battle between her sentient blades and his sentient blades rocked on, almost forgotten from her mind as she got closer to Naruto. Her condescending words hit Naruto, and a memory flooded into his head. Blue eyes looked down on the kneeling form of a blue-haired child, barely even 5 years old, beaten and bruised from his effort to fight his father. Minato lightly sneered down at his son as the short child panted for air. Naruto hesitantly raised his head to look up at his father, tears pouring down in torrents as his father dipped his hand into a bowl of water and pulled out a sparkling, multicolored fish. He held the fish in the air and Naruto began yelling, Daddy, no! You will forever be reminded of your inability to protect your precious goldfish. He squeezed the dying creature in his hands and the blood trickled from between his fingers, falling onto Naruto's aghast face, frozen that his father, the man he had once looked up to despite all the hate he got in return, had killed his secret companion. The man remained unfazed by the boy's lack of response and hammered the final nail on the coffin by dropping the dead fish on his son's head and saying, staring into the boy's blue eyes, freaks don't deserve love. He was left there on the training field, cradling the body of his first friend. Minato Namikaze was the eternal presence in Naruto's life that reminded him that he wasn't strong enough to protect his goldfish, the prize he won from a dingy man during the Kyuubi festival. He had broken his hope when he was a child, forced him into seclusion filled with depression and suicidal thoughts, until he encountered Kisame and got Samahata. The memory of his goldfish being killed haunted him every day, crippling his confidence drastically and slowly killing his will to live. That was until he met Minisaki Aburaim. To the village he was all smiles, but she was the first person to chip away his facade and became his friend. She was the first person to openly care about him, besides his little siblings, and that had cemented her in his heart. And this woman wanted to kill her while he watched? He would rather have his heart torn out of his living, breathing body and have his dead body experimented on by his uncle Orochimaru. Amuri furrowed her eyebrows as she saw Naruto tighten his fists, just as she got to him, and his eyes opened. His blue hair spiked around wildly and he muttered, Water-saban. Bullets of hair needles shot from his head at her, and she held her hands over her eyes to prevent the needles from getting into her eyes, hastily leaping away from him. Naruto staggered to his feet and Minisaki fell onto her knees, gasping in relief, thanking every power out there that he was still alive. Blood leaked from the puncture wounds in her hands, but she shook them off and summoned her blades, flashing to him and swiping her blades down on him. Stay down. The teen rolled backwards, closing his eyes as bright white lightning exploded after the attack, and he stretched his hand to his own sword, down on one knee and panting for air. Samahata didn't leap out of the ground but rather stretched to Naruto, intercepting another downward slam from the twin fangs and allowing Naruto to grab onto its gray, scaled, lengthened handle and heaving it out of the ground from where he stood. He winced as he was reminded of his broken elbow and lifted the heavy sword in his better hand, using the sword to block another attack from the frenzied woman. He clenched the sword's hilt, and it reduced in size, light enough to make the fast Namikaze move around easier. He jabbed forward and grazed the woman's side while she spun away. He slashed towards her again and scratched off her knuckles as she raised her weapons a little too high to block the last attack. In her desperation she fell onto her butt and threw her blade at Naruto. The shark boy remained neutral as he leveled his sentient blade with the incoming weapon, and Samahata opened wide, exposing a nightmarish mouth, and swallowed the blade, holding it in its stomach and sucking out whatever chakra it had in it so that it lay dormant there. The Samahata wielder swung his sword at her again, and she held it in her shaky hands still on the ground, and the sheer amount of strength he applied violently ripped the lone Fang blade out of her hands. The blade was thrown about 10 feet away from her, and impaled the ground. Naruto thrust his large weapon at her and stopped just short of her face. Samahata took this as an opportunity to open its mouth and show her his rows and rows of teeth, winding down his mouth. Its long purple tongue burst from deep within its pitch-dark belly and licked her face, then it wrapped around her neck and gently squeezed, telling her that he didn't need to shave her face off to kill her. He could just have his sword eat her, grind her against the sword's hundreds of teeth and slice off her skin little by little, keeping her alive long enough to feel the true pain of being eaten. She could feel her chakra leave her, dragged out of her and into the purple-scaled sword's swelling body, leaving her weak and trembling. I give up. Please don't kill me, she pleaded with her eyes tightly shut and her body limp. Naruto considered her silently, still commanding his sword to keep his tongue around her neck before he withdrew and allowed her to slump onto the ground, heaving in air and quaking with fear at seeing the inside of the legendary Samahata. He was immediately bowled over by a teary-eyed Aburame who hugged him like she had never hugged him before. Naruto grunted and chuckled lowly when he felt her tremble. He draped his sword-holding arm over her and carefully held her closely. He felt his burned shirt get slightly wet and he grinned proudly. I told you I could do it. He groaned when she lightly jabbed him and sniffed. I knew you could do it. Her voice was muffled against his shirt and he smiled warmly down at her. Don't you ever die on me, Naruto-kun, she said quietly as she looked up at him, her dark makeup ruined by her crying. A small smile came to her face when he gasped dramatically. I'll have you know, Saki-chan, that I am a very hard person to kill. Kami knows how many times you've tried. She fisted his shirt and pushed her face into his chest. Idiot. They savored each other's presence until Samahata interrupted by buzzing lowly, and then squeaking. This isn't the time for a knock-knock joke, Naruto muttered hotly. The sword purred like a cat. It can wait. I'm having a moment here. His eyes flicked to the girl tightly gripping his shirt and back to his sword. Speaking of moments, that was a good fight, Naruto, Aizen shouted to his student as he sent the boy a thumbs up, standing behind the injured swordswoman while his Niken, Jet, clanged her jaws together once to tell the woman not to try anything funny. The oldest Namake's child then groaned at the memory that he had just come out of a life-or-death fight against an A-rank ninja, and he gently pried the Aburame off him. She looked up at him with concern and he just winked. A blush covered her face at this, and he gently handed her his sword and Samahata begrudgingly didn't attack her by spiking out its handle seeing as Naruto was the one that gave him to her, willingly. Naruto turned to the woman, giving his Hyuga friend a fist bump as he passed by him, and stretched his hand down to the woman. Amuri looked up at the hand then to his face. The boy smiled widely and said, I can't have my servant all banged up. I still want you to prepare camel for this night. She sneered at him, but her expression smoothened to pleased as she took his hand. My, I'm starting to like this whole servant thing, Naruto-sama. She bowed her head and kissed his hand. Naruto laughed and looked over his shoulder to silently tell his girlfriend to hold on before she attacked the injured Kiri ninja with his own sword. The boy pulled the older ninja to him till she was mere inches away from his face and he growled. His teeth elongated until they protruded out of his mouth, widening his jaws. His eyes turned into dangerous black and blue slits. She gulped thickly and shivered, petrified, as he took the image of a great white shark, and the blood dripping out of his broken nose and the dried blood around his mouth didn't lessen the imposing, man-eating figure of doom he cast over her. If you even think of betraying me, I will beat you to death and drink your blood from a moldy boot. He shoved her away and she just barely managed to steady herself on her one good leg. He turned away and his face changed back to normal before his girlfriend could see it. Nothing had ever aroused her in her life than that short display of killer intent by her new master, stirring a fire deep in her gut that could not be extinguished using contemporary means. Her heart raced and her face flushed a deep red as she gripped her chest, both flustered and completely subdued. She bit her lips and began panting, rubbing her thighs together, and praying no one noticed her situation. Jet whimpered as she sniffed the air around the woman, thick with arousal and desire. The dog scurried away from her, and hid behind Aizen. The man closed his eyes as silent man tears fell down, cursing his student's luck at attracting women. What if Naruto wields a sentient weapon harem? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.